Christine Johnson, like many little girls, dreamed of a Hollywood star's life from childhood, being beautiful, wealthy, and famous. She grew up in a loving family, had a happy childhood, and ambitious plans for the future. Christine's desire to become famous came true, but unfortunately, not due to her talents, but because of the cruelty of her killer, and the details will shock you because her body was found with a torn-off ear. Born in 1981 in Santa Clara, California, Christine soon moved with her parents, Teresa and Kirk Johnson, to the small town of Saugatuck in Michigan. It was a cozy and picturesque place with a population of less than 1,000 people, where an atmosphere of peace and security prevailed. Crime here was extremely low, so locals didn't even lock their doors, not fearing criminals. Everyone in the community knew each other. Christine grew up along with her brother Derek, who was a few years older, in a family that seemed friendly and happy at first glance. However, the family idyll was shattered when the parents decided to divorce. Despite this, they maintained a good relationship for the sake of the children. According to the custody plan, Christine and Derek alternately lived with their mom and dad. Due to such circumstances, the girl got involved in household chores early and started helping her mother at the age of 12, including with the family budget. Striving for financial independence, Christine tried to get any job so as not to ask her parents for money. Meanwhile, her brother went to serve in the army and then decided to become a career military man. While studying in high school, Christine, having become independent, took her life into her own hands. Intelligence and natural beauty helped her in this. The girl was cheerful, fun, and an interesting conversationalist. She looked great thanks to an active and healthy lifestyle. Relatives, admiring Christine's beauty, advised her to conquer Hollywood. The girl got the most pleasure from sailing, surfing, and other water activities that she enjoyed when visiting her grandmother in California. However, after returning to Michigan, Christine missed her favorite hobbies and needed time to adjust to a different way of life. Here she became passionate about theater, being a member of a small acting group. In winter, she worked part-time as a waitress in a local cafe. Thanks to her friendliness, politeness, and sociability, Christine became a real find for the owner of the establishment, attracting more and more visitors. Christine increasingly thought about leaving the small town of Saugatuck. The measured life of the province did not appeal to her. The girl was convinced that she deserved something more than just serving food in a cafe. Christine saw no serious prospects for herself in this town. After graduating from high school in 1999, she finally gained enough freedom to start building her own life and path to success. Having thought over her situation, Christine decided to go in search of herself. The girl traveled to different cities, worked there, and tried her hand at various fields of activity. Eventually, in 2000, she chose California, which she loved so much, as her place of residence. This state attracted her with its wonderful climate and much wider opportunities for realizing her potential. At first, Christine moved in with her grandmother, who lived in the small resort town of Santa Maria with a population of 100,000 people. Despite being close to her favorite entertainment, the girl first focused on solving important issues. First of all, she started looking for a job, because providing for herself was very important to her. Christine got a job as a system administrator in the city's electric power company. Then she focused on her education and decided to enter the University of California. The educational institution was located a 40-minute drive from her grandmother's house. Christine successfully passed the entrance tests and bought a car with the money she had earned earlier. However, even with her own transport, daily trips over such long distances took too much of her time. Therefore, the girl began to look for a job closer to the university. This is how Christine first touched her dream Hollywood. She managed to get a part-time job with a film crew that was planning to shoot a movie. The experience of performing in a theater group helped the girl quickly adapt to the new working atmosphere. Eventually, she was hired as an assistant on the set of a thriller. Here, Christine met people who lived and breathed Hollywood. For a girl from the province, it was a real starry moment. She communicated with world-famous actors and directors and felt incredible happiness. Christine could not believe that she had the opportunity to interact with celebrities. The world of cinema completely captivated her. This work inspired young Christine so much that she wanted to be even closer to the film industry. The girl enrolled in professional makeup courses taught by Hollywood makeup artists. Having mastered these skills, she thought about becoming a makeup artist on a film set. For this, Christine was going to go to the city of her dreams, Los Angeles. Although it was quite a risky journey, curiosity overcame the fear of the unknown. The girl was irresistibly drawn to Hollywood. Eventually, Christine moved to Los Angeles, a city where several famous film studios are located at once. For a young and attractive girl, it was a real period of trials and temptations, but she demonstrated the best manners and decency that only a young lady is capable of. Despite the popular trends in the environment she found herself in, Christine did not lead a dissolute lifestyle. The girl avoided noisy parties and get-togethers, remaining a rather modest person. She had a relationship with a guy she had met a few years ago and continued to communicate with, overcoming the distance between them. Later, he moved to Christine, and starting from 2002, the young people decided to rent an apartment in Los Angeles together. Since they had not yet achieved financial stability, such a step was beneficial for both of them. It was a difficult adventure, but Christine did not lose heart and began to look for a new job on a permanent basis. However, difficulties arose with this. The girl managed to find only temporary part-time jobs, and there was no serious work. The lion's share of their joint budget was earned by her boyfriend. Meanwhile, relations between Christine and Todd became more and more tense. Later, the girl complained to her mother that verbal altercations with her beloved increasingly turned into physical violence on his part. She found herself trapped in a toxic relationship, complicated by financial hardship. Christine's mother began to look for new housing for her daughter so that she could move away from her problematic partner. Eventually, Christine broke up with her boyfriend and settled in a small apartment. She continued to get an education remotely. During this period, her father provided the girl with substantial financial support. He believed that his daughter would finally find her place in life and realize her calling, so he sought to help her in every possible way. By November 2002, Christine finally managed to get a job at a mobile communications company, but this position was far from her ideals. Neither the field of activity nor the level of income met the girl's expectations. In addition, Christine still could not find acceptable housing near her place of work. Instead, her mother found a cozy house in the town of Santa Monica, neighboring Los Angeles, which had to be shared with 2 more girls. The attractive thing was that it was located next to the beach in a lively residential area. It seemed like an ideal place to get on her feet, so Christine moved there. During this period, the girl transferred to the University of Santa Monica. Christine's dreams of Hollywood did not come true. She failed to start a career, her relationship with her beloved fell apart, and she was actually forced to start her life from scratch. However, the girl did not lose heart and continued to steadily go towards her dream. On February 15, 2003, Christine planned to attend a party. Before that, the young beauty visited a shopping center. She had a long, fun conversation with her mother, during which they discussed the girl's plans for the future. This call was Christine's last contact with her loved ones. The next day, on Sunday, February 16, 2003, the mother was eagerly waiting for a call from her daughter, hoping to hear about how the previous day had gone. However, the girl never got in touch. The worried woman tried to call Christine herself, but her phone was unavailable. At first, this did not cause serious concern, because the daughter could be resting or at work and not hear the call. However, the next day there was still no news from Christine. Around 9 in the morning, the alarmed mother called her daughter's work. Christine was always in touch and answered calls, but this time an answering machine worked instead of her. Then the woman contacted the girl's manager, who informed her that she had not shown up for work. He emphasized that Christine was a very responsible employee, and during the last 3 months she had no delays or absenteeism. The girl's absence surprised all her colleagues, but they also could not reach her. As the manager said, Christine was last seen at work on February 14th. One of her co-workers recalled that the girl was going to some party. The mother of the missing girl visited her daughter's page on social networks, hoping to find useful information about this event. But in vain, Christine had not published a single photo. Although previously she actively maintained her profile, actually documenting every step of her life. The woman also checked her daughter's bank accounts, but no transactions had been made since her disappearance. In search of her daughter, the mother called all the hospitals, but Christine was not registered anywhere. So on February 17th, she decided to contact the Santa Monica Police Department with a statement about the disappearance of her 21-year-old daughter. The investigators checked whether a girl matching the description had been involved in traffic accidents during these days, but found nothing. The missing beauty's neighbors also heard nothing about her since her disappearance. The police turned to Christine's ex-boyfriend, Todd, with whom she had a rather stormy and sometimes violent relationship. The version was considered that he could have found his beloved who had run away from him and done something to her. But the young man denied seeing the girl. Christine's neighbors were only able to provide superficial information about the last day they saw the girl. According to them, on Saturday, February 15th, the missing girl was going to some party, but with whom and where exactly they did not know. The same information came from the girl's colleagues when they communicated with her mother. This clue became the first in the investigation, so the detectives began to carefully check it. Later, another detective joined the case. While reviewing the collected materials, he was struck by the photo of the missing girl. The crime victim bore a striking resemblance to another girl who had disappeared earlier and was found dead in 1995. That girl, starting her modeling career, agreed to a photo shoot for the glossy magazine Photographer. But these plans were not destined to come true. It was about Linda Sobek, killed by photographer Charles Redburn. He lured the beautiful blonde out of town by deception, where he dishonored and took her life. The policeman knew that at the time of Christine's disappearance, Linda's killer was already serving a sentence in prison, so physically he could not be involved in the new crime. However, it could be a follower of Charles, who was inspired by his scheme of action. Detectives needed at least some clue related to the missing girl, so they put out an alert for her car, a white Mazda Miata. At the same time, while communicating with Christine's mother, investigators found out more details about the girl's ex-boyfriend Todd, and also learned the name of her new chosen one, Lucas. However, the woman knew very little about the latter. She could not even name his last name, which greatly complicated the search. More than 48 hours had passed since Christine's disappearance, a critical period in such cases. The police seriously considered the possibility that the girl might already be dead. They began to analyze the billing data of her mobile phone. It turned out that the last outgoing call was made on February 15th at 17:34. Christine called the directory service at 411, which could indicate that she was in trouble and was trying to clarify an address or someone's phone number. The conversation lasted about 3 minutes, so this communication could be of great importance for the investigation. Unfortunately, it was not possible to find out the exact content of the dialogue, since such calls were not recorded. After that conversation, the girl's mobile phone was discharged. The last location of the gadget, recorded by the system, indicated the area of Ventura Boulevard. The police decided to involve the media in the investigation. The headlines immediately featured messages about Christine's disappearance with hints of the similarity of this case to Linda's murder. In search of clues, investigators carefully searched the apartment where Christine lived. Among the finds was a receipt from a lingerie store, dated the day the girl disappeared, February 15th. The police managed to find out that, despite the aggressive behavior of her ex-boyfriend, Christine continued to maintain contact with him. Sometimes she visited him, the last time on February 7th, but the detectives managed to find the most serious clue while studying the missing girl's email. On February 13th, Christine sent a message to the party coordinator, in which she expressed a passionate anticipation of the holiday and her intention to buy a ticket. In response, she was informed about the complete sale of tickets, but assured that she would be included in a separate waiting list. This is a fairly common practice among organizers of events. With the participation of celebrities in this way, they encourage visitors to buy VIP tickets at greatly inflated prices. Finally, the police managed to find Christine's new boyfriend, Lucas, and talk to him. According to the young man, he last saw the girl on February 14th, the day before her disappearance. They watched a movie together, after which they parted. Lucas successfully passed a polygraph test, had a reliable alibi, and did not arouse any suspicion among the investigators. Later, the detectives interrogated Christine's ex-boyfriend Todd, but he also had an alibi, confirmed by several witnesses. It turned out that at the time of the girl's disappearance, Todd was out of town. Among all the versions, the police were most interested in the one that was associated with the party where Christine was heading and from where she never returned. Investigators were convinced that the key to unraveling the girl's disappearance lies here. They contacted the organizers of the event and were shocked by what they heard. It turns out that Christine never bought a ticket and did not show up at the party. But where did the girl go then? To restore the chronology of events on the fateful evening, the police tracked transactions from the missing girl's bank card. This helped to establish all the stores that Christine visited that day. Law enforcement officers carefully reviewed the recordings from video surveillance cameras in these establishments, hoping to identify something extraordinary or stumble upon clues. But this painstaking work took a lot of time. In parallel with the analysis of these data, the police received an alarming call. A woman named Susan Murphy reported a suspicious guy she met at a store. He introduced himself as Victor Thomas, an employee of a film company that conducts casting for a new James Bond movie. The man began to put psychological pressure on Susan, inviting her to the role of Bond's girl and admiring her beauty. He persistently inclined the woman to participate in the casting, but this seemed extremely suspicious to her. Susan barely managed to refuse at the last moment. Fortunately, she went to meet with the stranger accompanied by her husband, a former police officer. Susan's husband personally spoke with Victor, trying to inquire about his true intentions, but the suspect suddenly fled without providing any useful information. Later, Susan decided to check all the data she knew about Victor and found out that he was lying. Victor Thomas had nothing to do with the film industry. Moreover, a person with that name did not exist at all. It seems that the man invented a legend, similar to Linda Sabic's killer, in order to meet a beautiful woman. But for what purpose remained a mystery. Although Susan's story ended well, Victor was still at large and could continue his shenanigans. Therefore, the police urgently began to check the received information and search for the suspicious guy. It was quite possible that he had evil intentions. Investigators studied the recordings from surveillance cameras of all the stores where Christine made purchases on the eve of her disappearance, but found nothing worthy of attention. Then they decided to go around the shops and interview the staff. The salespeople were shown a sketch of Victor, who allegedly harassed beautiful girls. In one of the stores, the cashier recalled seeing a similar man, but could not provide any more details. Eventually, an artist arrived on the scene to compile a sketch of the suspect. The search for Christine was gaining momentum. Dog handlers with dogs and volunteers were sent to the area from where the girl last got in touch and called the directory service. Patrols and volunteers continued to look for the missing girl's car and Christine herself. There were many messages from citizens that a similar car was seen in different places, but all these clues turned out to be false. Finally, on February 24th, an important signal was received by the police. In the parking lot of the shopping center that Christine visited on the day of her disappearance, her car was found a white Mazda Miata. The forensic expert who arrived at the scene conducted a thorough inspection of the interior, seized fingerprints and all potential evidence. A bottle of water was found on the back seat, and the missing girl's mobile phone was on the front seat. But the investigators were most surprised by the story of the parking lot guide. The man recalled a strange incident related to this car. The car drove into the spot at 17:45, although it was reserved for another client. Some man got out of the car who, upon hearing the guard's remark, behaved extremely aggressively. The stranger threw the car keys at the guard and left without any explanation. There was no one in the cabin at that time. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras in the parking lot, so it was not possible to see the driver. Having no clues, the detectives decided to return to the analysis of Christine's purchases on the day of her disappearance. What they found shocked the investigators. On the eve of her disappearance, the girl bought clothes that exactly matched the description provided by Susan. When inviting the woman to the casting, Victor asked her to wear an extremely short black mini-skirt, a white blouse, stockings and shoes. It was these very items that were paid for with Christine's credit card. The police ruled out the possibility of a simple coincidence. It seemed that the girl had fallen for the bait of a fraudster whose true motives remained a mystery. Christine repeated Susan's fate. Only the latter was lucky to have an escort in the form of her husband. Unfortunately, no information about the mysterious Victor could be found, and law enforcement officers were at an impasse. They turned to Christine's roommates again. The girls recalled that the missing woman was indeed going to some kind of casting, but they could not provide any details. During the conversation, they managed to remember that the audition was definitely related to a James Bond movie. According to them, Christine was extremely excited on the eve of the event. The description of her outfit, a blouse and a mini-skirt in which she left the house, completely coincided with the officers' fears. Christine was very afraid of being late for the casting scheduled for 17:30. She was wearing the exact revealing clothes that the villain had asked Susan to wear, and possibly Christine herself. Detectives continued to review the surveillance camera footage over and over again, hoping to find Victor. Eventually, they managed to spot the right man in the store where the employees mentioned him. However, the video quality was so low that it was impossible to make out facial features. Still, it was at least some kind of lead. Using eyewitness testimony, investigators were able to compile an approximate portrait of the suspect. By February 26th, a sketch of the main suspect in the disappearance of the young beauty was created. One of the experienced detectives, having familiarized himself with the case materials, recognized Victor Paleologus in it. who had been released on parole very recently, on January 20th, 23. In the past, the man had already been convicted of a sexual crime. Among the episodes of his rich criminal past, there was a case when he lured a woman named Christine Kludgian to his apartment in a similar manner. After inviting her to a supposedly noisy party with celebrities, Victor met the victim in an empty, quiet house. There he began to harass the guest, and when she resisted, he attacked her. The attacker used a rope, strangled Christine with it, and then tried to tie the woman up for violence. But the victim had enough strength to break free, run out of the apartment, and call the neighbors for help. Victor Paleologus used the same scheme, luring victims with promises of casting or invitations to parties. This technique worked flawlessly, especially near the Walk of Fame. Many girls came to Los Angeles in search of fulfilling their Hollywood dream, and villains like Victor took advantage of this. For the first attack on a girl, Paleologus got off with only a suspended sentence. Later, there was an attempt to dishonor Katie DeBiono in 1998. Then he called himself Brian, a movie producer. For this crime, he was punished with a minimum term. There was reason to believe that Victor was also involved in embezzlement of funds in the company where he previously worked. In addition, the police identified many other victims, women whom Paleologus tried to use. However, all the statements of the victims were ignored by law enforcement officers due to lack of evidence. Once Victor broke into the house of his ex-girlfriend. Although he did not manage to bring his criminal intent to the end, the man still stole money and jewelry from the home. And even for this act, he got off with only a suspended sentence. Later, an even more serious case occurred. Victor lured a girl named Heather into a trap. As always, he incited her to dress in a seductive manner. It seems that this particular appearance of the victim excited him the most. Then Paleologus tried to tie the girl up in order to get intimate, but Heather miraculously managed to break free. Somehow she managed to push the attacker away with the sharp heel of her shoe. These precious seconds allowed her to run out of the trap and hide in her own car. The girl filed a statement against the offender. For this crime, Victor received 2 years in prison, but was released on parole on January 20th, 2003. This happened just 3 weeks before Christine's disappearance. It seems that once at liberty, the repeat offender took up the old. By the time the police got on the trail of Paleologus, he had already been arrested. This time he stole a BMW X5 in Beverly Hills and tried to sell the car with forged documents. The detainee was found to have a wallet with a whole bunch of stolen IDs, credit cards, and other documents. Victor perfectly matched the type of criminal involved in Christine's disappearance. His handwriting completely coincided with what was known to the investigation. All the facts pointed to Paleologus, so the detectives decided to show his photo to Susan, who avoided the attack thanks to the intervention of her husband. At the police station, Susan unhesitatingly pointed to Victor's photograph among other pictures. Later, during the identification procedure, she again unmistakably identified him, noting that she immediately recognized the man, despite obvious attempts to change his appearance. Paleologus slouched a little, extended one arm, making it longer than the other, and combed his hair in a new way. But all these tricks did not help him avoid exposure. During a separate check, Susan's husband, who once tried to detain the criminal, also recognized him. Unfortunately, the parking lot guard where the missing girl's car was found could not identify the suspect. He only managed to see Victor for a moment from afar and in the dark, without seeing his face. At the time the photo was presented, Paleologus was already behind bars, although on the day of Christine's disappearance he was still at large. During the interrogation, the suspect denied any involvement in the girl's disappearance and flatly refused to admit the fact of communicating with Susan, despite the presence of irrefutable evidence to the contrary. Victor refused to testify without a lawyer, explaining this by his recent parole and fears that he was being framed. So the detectives continued to collect evidence against him. Soon a new witness came forward, a realtor who had been working with Victor for the last few weeks and noticed some oddities in his behavior. Paleologus was looking through a real estate agent for a house worth up to $700,000. They inspected several properties every day, when suddenly a message came about the disappearance of documents and keys from one of the houses. Then the realtor did not even suspect that his client could be involved in this. But as soon as he saw Victor's photo in the news summary, everything fell into place. The witness also identified the suspect. According to him, their last meeting took place just a day before Christine's disappearance. Then Victor behaved strangely. He was somewhat nervous. In one of the inspected houses, he went to the toilet and began to shout loudly from there. allegedly checking the quality of sound insulation. The police suggested that this way the man could look for a place for his criminal actions, where the screams of the victims would remain unheard. Detectives examined all the houses that Paleologus visited. They paid special attention to the object that so intrigued the suspect. Interestingly, this dwelling was located in the same area where Christine's mobile phone signal was last recorded. Investigators literally turned the house upside down, looking for at least some evidence of Victor's involvement in the girl's disappearance or her possible body, but found nothing. Meanwhile, searches continued in Paleologus' apartment. Photos of women in clothes that the suspect seemed to especially like were found on his computer. A short skirt, a white blouse, stockings and high-heeled shoes. It had been 12 days since the start of the investigation, but the missing girl's family still cherished the hope of Christine returning home alive. Victor continued to deny everything and was in no hurry to share any information with the police. He only confirmed the fact of meeting the girl, after which, according to him, they went their separate ways and he did not see her again. Victor Paleologus was born in 1962 in Pennsylvania into an ordinary family. He was the youngest of 5 brothers. The man graduated from college with a bachelor's degree, after which he entered graduate school in Los Angeles. From 1990 to 1993, he was married. Interestingly, some facts indicated that in 1991 Victor could have tried to poison his wife when she filed a statement against him. All of Paleologus' attempts to organize his own restaurant business failed. It seemed that this was a world-weary loser who had slipped into a life of crime. It seems that Victor's fetish for beautiful women forced him to cross a dangerous line, and he began to attack them for the purpose of intimacy and sexual gratification. Regarding the evening of Christine's disappearance, Paleologus, together with his lawyer, provided an alibi. Allegedly, Victor had dinner with an acquaintance in a restaurant. This information was indeed confirmed, but law enforcement officers understood that despite this, the man still had enough time to play out another criminal drama and kidnap a new victim. On March 1st, another witness called the police. According to his statement, on February 15th, he saw the missing girl. She stopped near his house in search of some mansion that resembled a castle. The man could not help her because he himself did not know where this building was located. Instead, his wife, hearing their conversation, told Christine the direction. The incident occurred around 1730. Now it became clear for what purpose the girl dialed the number of the directory service 411. She needed navigation to a building that looked like a castle. Investigators had a new lead. Moreover, it was in such a house that Victor checked the quality of sound insulation. Everything pointed to him. While the detectives were working with this data, a new event occurred. On March 3rd, 2003, 4 teenage friends were walking through the Hollywood Hills, admiring the picturesque panorama of Los Angeles. Suddenly, one of the guys, approaching the edge of a cliff, noticed some strange object below, 100 meters from him. At first, the young men thought it was a mannequin. They tried to go down to take a closer look at the find, but could not overcome the entire distance. However, this was enough to understand that it was a human body. The frightened guys for a long time could not decide what to do next, because none of them took a mobile phone with them. Eventually, they went to the police station. On the way, the teenagers met a woman who was walking dogs and told her about the horrendous find. She approached the body to make sure the guys were not mistaken. The victim was wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt. Her legs were tied and wrapped in blue fabric. The hands of the deceased were behind her back, and a hairband was on her right wrist. Below the waist, tattered stockings were visible. Frightened by what she saw, the woman called the police. Soon, law enforcement officers and rescuers arrived at the scene. They had to sweat a lot to get the mutilated body from the hard-to-reach area. Obviously, the criminal hoped that his victim would never be found here. Perhaps this would have happened if it were not for the quick-witted teenagers who accidentally wandered into this deserted area. The forensic expert identified the deceased as the missing Christine Johnson. Her body was found not far from the house that Victor liked so much during the real estate viewing with the realtor. The girl's parents were immediately informed about the tragic news, who could not believe the reality of what had happened and did not hold back their despair over the loss of their daughter. Christine's entire body was covered with bruises and scratches, indicating desperate attempts to resist. The corpse was in a terrible condition and had time to undergo significant putrefactive changes, lying under the scorching sun for more than 1 day. In addition, it rained 1 day. The face was especially disfigured, which was facilitated by both numerous injuries and the unnatural position of the deceased's body with her head lowered. Someone tore off the girl's ear. The expert also noted large bruises on Christine's head and neck, which indicated a traumatic brain injury and strangulation. Initially, this was recognized as the cause of death, but soon even more horrific details were clarified. Investigators had no doubt that it was Victor Paleologus who was involved in the murder of Christine Johnson. However, it was necessary to prove that at the time of the girl's death, the suspect did not have an alibi. For this purpose, the detectives went to Joey, an acquaintance with whom Victor allegedly had dinner that fatal evening. But it turned out that in fact it was not a friend, but a casual acquaintance. During a thorough interrogation, the man admitted that he and Victor had agreed to meet much later than the incident with Christine occurred. According to Joey, they met Paleologus only the day before. On February 15th, Victor was late for the meeting, arriving around midnight, although they initially planned to meet much earlier. The suspect's face had fresh scratches, which he explained as an accidental injury during the move. The police step-by-step recreated the probable sequence of events that preceded the disappearance of Christine Johnson. According to the investigation, the criminal noticed a beautiful young girl in a shopping center where he often hunted for victims and decided to act according to the usual scenario. He introduced himself as a film industry worker and offered Christine to audition for the role of James Bond's girl. Victor was remarkably convincing. Acting according to a well-established scheme, he showered the girl with compliments, assuring that she was perfect for this role. Given Christine's youth and ambitions, she believed the villain and could not refuse the tempting offer. Paleologus scheduled a meeting in one of the houses that he recently inspected with a realtor, explaining that this was where the audition would take place. Christine, somewhere deep down suspecting a trap, still prepared for the casting and dressed the way Victor asked. She arrived at the place with a slight delay, as she got lost on the way and contacted the directory service. This is how the girl found herself in the clutches of a deadly trap from which she never got out. During the meeting, Christine became a victim of Victor's harassment, but desperately resisted and even managed to scratch his face. But she had nowhere to run, and the physically stronger man quickly overcame the resistance. Paleologus dishonored the helpless girl and then killed her to get rid of an unwanted witness. First, he hit her on the head and strangled her, and only then threw the mutilated body into the Hollywood Hills. But the most terrible thing was that the traumatic brain injury and strangulation did not lead to Christine's instant death. The girl only lost consciousness, and the inhuman Victor mistook it for death. By throwing the body off a cliff, he doomed the victim to a slow and painful death. Christine, having fallen from a considerable height, received numerous fractures and internal injuries. She regained consciousness for some time, but never waited for rescue, bleeding to death alone. Only a few hours later, the girl finally died from her injuries. On May 12, 2003, the district attorney officially charged Victor Paleologus with kidnapping, violence, and first-degree murder. However, the defense was fully prepared to defend the client's innocence because there was a lack of direct evidence of his guilt. The prosecution faced a difficult battle, so forensic experts used all the available weighty arguments. Victor's lawyers questioned the time of the victim's death, referring to the insects found on the body. Instead, prosecutors emphasized the striking similarity of the killer's handwriting with previous attacks on women. The cases were so identical that it was impossible not to mention them in court. Preparation for the trial was delayed, so Victor Paleologus appeared before the jury only in July 2006. The defense emphasized that the prosecution actually had no material evidence against the defendant, no DNA analysis, no fingerprints, no video surveillance recordings that would link him to the murder. This was explained by the fact that Christine's mutilated body was found only 2 weeks after her disappearance, and during this time most of the traces had time to deteriorate. However, the testimony of women accusing Victor of harassment and attacks was more than enough. After their statements, the sympathies were on the side of the prosecution. Without exception, all the victims talked about Victor's remarkable talent for manipulation. The man was so careful and convincing that even the most cautious victims like Susan Murphy initially believed his sweet promises and agreed to take part in the alleged casting, not even suspecting what was really waiting for them. It seemed that after hearing this, no one had any doubts that it was Victor Paleologus who killed the unfortunate Christine. But the defendant had a last ace up his sleeve. To avoid the death penalty, Victor proposed to make a deal with the investigation and plead guilty to a less serious crime. Now the fate of Paleologus was in the hands of the relatives of the deceased girl. At that time, the exhausting trial had been going on for 3 weeks and threatened to drag on for a long time. Given the uncertainty of the verdict and the burden of the grief experienced, Christine's family agreed to make concessions in exchange for a confession. However, Victor unexpectedly changed his mind and on the day of sentencing sent the judge an 11-page petition asking to cancel his confession. Fortunately, the law was on the side of justice, and it was no longer possible to cancel the previous statement. The court found Victor Paleologus guilty on all counts and sentenced him to life imprisonment with the right to parole no earlier than after 25 years.
What you're about to hear will make you shudder. Imagine police officers weeping in horror at what they've seen. Imagine a family where members die one after another under mysterious circumstances. No, this isn't the plot of a mystical thriller. This is a real story that happened to an incredibly charming girl. Daisy Coleman, a young beauty, seemed to have everything one could dream of: a kind heart, a sharp mind, and numerous talents. However, behind the appearance of this charming girl hid a tormented soul that had to endure terrible events at an early age. Daisy was born in the small town of Albany, Missouri, on March 30th, 1997. Her father, Michael, worked as a doctor, and her mother, Melinda, was a veterinarian. Daisy was raised in the Coleman family along with her 3 biological brothers, being the second child. Tragedy struck the family in 2009 when Michael, Daisy, and one of her younger brothers were traveling to a neighboring town for a wrestling competition. During this trip, their car collided with an obstacle on the road and flew into a ditch. Sadly, as a result of this terrible accident, the head of the family died. After losing her father, the Coleman family moved to the larger city of Maryville, also in Missouri. Melinda single-handedly raised her 3 sons and daughter, and although it wasn't easy, she managed her responsibilities. At that time, no one in the Coleman family, who had already experienced a horrific loss, could even imagine the curse that awaited them in the future. Early in the morning of January 8, 2012, 14-year-old Daisy Coleman regained consciousness in the yard of her own house. Outside, there was a bone-chilling cold, with temperatures reaching 0. Daisy was lying on the snow, her hair frozen to the ground. The girl was wearing only a t-shirt and sweatpants. At that moment, the first thought that flashed through Daisy's mind was, "I must be dead." She couldn't get up or call for help. Her speech was slurred and confused. Daisy was crying. With great difficulty, the girl managed to crawl to the front door of the house and bang on it with all her might. The clock showed 5 and it was a real miracle that Daisy's mother, Melinda, who was sleeping in her room, heard a strange knocking at the door through her sleep. At first, she thought it was their dogs that had gotten cold outside and were trying to get into the house. The woman threw on a robe and headed for the front door to let the animals into the warm home. When Melinda opened the door, she saw her daughter Daisy on the threshold. The girl was lying on the cold steps, almost unconscious. She reeked heavily of alcohol, unable to speak, only crying. The mother instantly screamed, calling for her sons to help. The boys woke up, quickly ran downstairs, and carried the frozen Daisy into the house. The whole family was terrified. At first, they tried to warm the girl with blankets, but the mother, upon closely examining her daughter, realized that her legs were most likely severely frostbitten. So the mother filled the bathtub with water and asked her sons to take Daisy to the bathroom, leave her there, and go out. The girl was still unconscious. The mother herself began to undress her daughter and saw huge bruises and red marks on her legs. It was only at this moment that the woman realized something terrible had happened to her beloved Daisy. The mother gently immersed Daisy in a bathtub with cool water. As a veterinarian, she knew well how to provide first aid for frostbite. The woman gradually increased the water temperature in the bathtub, thus slowly warming her daughter's body. Fortunately, she managed to help Daisy. Soon the girl warmed up, but her speech remained unclear and confused. It was difficult for Daisy to speak, so the alarmed Melinda called 911 and summoned the police. When the police officers arrived at the scene, they immediately began examining Daisy. However, the girl was still under the influence of alcohol, and her mind was clouded, so she couldn't clearly recount the events of the previous night. Under these circumstances, the police had to turn to Daisy's friend, Paige, who was also at the Coleman family's house that night and slept in the same room as Daisy. Paige shared her version of the events with the officers. As her friend recounted, on Saturday, January 7th, 2012, Daisy invited her best friend Paige to her house for a sleepover. In the evening, the girls decided to watch a few horror movies, and for a greater effect, drank strong alcoholic beverages that they had secretly stolen from the Coleman family's home bar. Closer to midnight, Daisy began exchanging messages with her older brother's friend, 17-year-old Matthew Bonnet, who was the star of the school football team. Upon learning that Daisy was spending the night with a friend, Matthew sent the girls a message proposing they have fun at his place.
Daisy and Paige enthusiastically agreed to this adventure and arranged to meet with Matthew and his friends. Around 1 o'clock in the morning on January 8th, the girlfriends snuck out of Daisy's house through her bedroom window and ran around the corner, where Matthew and 4 of his friends were already waiting for them. The boys escorted the girls to Matthew's house, helped them get through the window into the basement, and asked them to be quiet so as not to wake up Barnett's parents, who were sleeping upstairs. According to Paige, as soon as she and Daisy found themselves in the basement, Matthew immediately began treating Daisy to alcohol. Paige sat nearby and watched as her friend drank one glass after another, almost without stopping. At some point, one of the boys, named Nicholas, approached Paige, took her hand, and led her to a neighboring empty room in the basement. There, at the young man's initiative, they had sexual intercourse. Meanwhile, Matthew and Daisy went to another room where there was a large bed. Several times, when the door opened, Paige was able to see what was happening in that room with Daisy. The girl was lying on the bed, barely conscious, unable to speak or move. Matthew took advantage of her helpless state and engaged in sexual intercourse with Daisy. His friend Jordan Zetch filmed everything that was happening on his smartphone camera. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the boys decided it was time to go home. They put the girls in the car and drove them to the Coleman family's house. Paige got out of the car first. Matthew told her that Daisy should sit outside in the fresh air to sober up. The boys assured that they would stay with Daisy and take care of her safety outside. They advised Paige to go home and go to bed. The friend believed their words and agreed to go alone. Paige got to the house, climbed through the window into Daisy's bedroom, fell on the bed, and instantly fell asleep. At this time, the boys pulled Daisy out of the car, set her on her feet, and supported her so she wouldn't fall. The girl got sick, so they took off her shoes, took her purse and cell phone, and held her hair while she vomited. Then they gently laid Daisy on the cold ground near the house. Fearing that they might be noticed and not wanting to take risks, the young men quickly got into the car and drove away. Daisy lay outside for about 3 hours in the bitter cold at 0 temperature. She was wearing only a t-shirt and sweatpants, without socks or shoes. Her hair was wet and frozen. Arriving at the scene on a call, the police officers thoroughly examined the Coleman family's house and the surrounding area. In Daisy's room, they came across 5 empty plastic bottles of alcoholic beverages. In the yard, they found Daisy's bag, her cell phone, shoes, and traces of vomit. That same morning, the victim was taken to the hospital for a medical examination. During the examination, numerous bruises on her legs and tears in the groin area were recorded on Daisy's body. The girl had several tests taken, one of which showed that the alcohol level in her blood was almost twice the maximum allowable limit. After a few hours in the hospital, Daisy finally regained consciousness. She reported that she did not remember any details of the previous night. The girl could not reproduce the details of what happened and admitted that she had drunk too much alcohol. However, Daisy did not deny the fact that she had taken alcoholic beverages from the home bar without her mother's permission and secretly ran away at night to the company of boys. Around 11 a.m. on January 8th, a few hours after the incident, law enforcement officers located Matthew Barnett, Jordan Zetch, and Nicholas Graumaudis. They were charged and all 3 were taken to the police station for interrogation. During questioning, Matthew Barnett did not deny having intimate relations with Daisy Coleman that night. However, he insisted that everything happened by mutual consent. The boy said that when he met Daisy and her friend Paige, the girls were already intoxicated. At first, Matthew denied treating Daisy to alcohol, but the more he spoke, the more entangled he became in his own testimony. Eventually, he did confess to treating Daisy to a few shots of strong drinks to melt her icy heart. Matthew reported that during intercourse, he used a condom, which he threw away on the way back to Daisy's house. Another person involved in the case, Jordan Zetch, initially refused to testify but later admitted to using his friend Nicholas' smartphone to record a video of Matthew kissing Daisy. The video lasted about 10 seconds. Jordan managed to show this video to his friends, but then, getting scared, deleted it. Nicholas, who had sexual intercourse with Daisy's friend Paige, was the only one who immediately fully admitted his guilt. He was sent to a juvenile detention center. Matthew's friend, who drove the boys and girls in his car to Daisy's house, said that throughout the ride, Daisy wouldn't stop crying, and Matthew expressed fears that the girl's brother Charlie would kill him if he found out what happened. At the same time, it became known that a few days before the terrible incident, Matthew had already visited the Coleman's home. That time, he had a peaceful dinner with the family at the same table in a friendly atmosphere. At 1 p.m. on January 8th, a search was conducted in the basement of Matthew Barnett's house. Police officers seized bed linen, several empty bottles, men's underwear, and plastic cups. During repeated interrogations, the sheriff's assistant, while talking to Matthew, was moved by the young man's story. At one point, the officer even suggested that girls often resort to such actions to attract attention, and it is quite possible that this case is one of those. The sheriff's assistant praised Matthew for taking care of the girl and driving her home. However, for some reason, the fact that the boy left Daisy alone to freeze on the street did not attract the officer's proper attention. Several days passed, and Daisy Coleman's health condition completely normalized. Her life was no longer in danger. However, the girl still could not recall any new details of that terrible night. 2 months later, in March 2012, all charges against Matthew Barnett and Jordan Zetch were completely dropped. The district attorney concluded that the intimate relationship between the young people occurred by mutual consent. The video recording that Jordan made that night could not be restored after deletion, although several of Jordan's classmates claimed they saw footage of Matthew kissing Daisy. During the analysis of the couple's smartphones, the investigation found out that Matthew and Daisy maintained telephone communication about once a month. In text messages, Daisy hinted to Matthew that she was ready to have sexual intercourse with him in exchange for a bottle of strong alcohol. In addition, correspondence was found dating back to before January 8th, in which Daisy and Matthew exchanged explicit messages of a sexual nature. After Matthew's release from custody, it became known that he was the grandson of an influential political figure, Rex Barnett, who had previously been a member of the state legislative assembly. Rex Barnett was a member of the Committee on Criminal Law and Public Safety. He had close ties with many prosecutors and police officers throughout the state of Missouri. Matthew and Jordan were released, and the boys returned to their normal lives. At the same time, Daisy Coleman hoped that the hype surrounding her nightly adventure would finally subside. The girl continued her education, but instead of support from her peers, she faced open hostility and ridicule. Most of her acquaintances sided with Matthew, and Daisy began to be called a liar and a slut. She instantly turned into an outcast, withdrew into herself, and tried to spend as much time as possible at home alone. Daisy, who had previously led an active social and public life, was involved in sports and dancing, now simply disappeared from sight. Moreover, the girl was forced to leave the school cheerleading squad. Daisy's mother, Melinda, began receiving anonymous threats daily, both at home and at work. Soon, the woman was asked to quit her job at the veterinary clinic, where she had worked for many years. After that, the Coleman family realized that they could no longer stay in the town of Maryville and decided to move to another place. In the spring of 2013, their empty house in Maryville, put up for sale, burned to the ground. The police never managed to establish the cause of the fire. There were rumors that Matthew Barnett's father was involved. Some time later, under extremely mysterious circumstances, the house of Daisy's friend named Paige also burned down. By that time, the girls had already stopped communicating. By the way, Paige also became an outcast at school. It is known that the girl suffered from nightmares for a long time. As time passed, Daisy's story attracted the attention of the media. The girl began receiving active support from people across the country, especially those who had experienced similar traumatic experiences. Thanks to this, Daisy managed to reopen the case against her main offender, Matthew Barnett. The case went to trial, but the boy was found guilty only of leaving Daisy alone in the cold in the middle of the night. Matthew Barnett was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay the Coleman family $2,800 in compensation. The other defendants in the case avoided any charges. Daisy Coleman continued to live her life, but regularly encountered not only words of support, but also threats from anonymous users on the internet. She understood how unfairly people behaved. Daisy took every negative message addressed to her very painfully. In 2016, when 19-year-old Daisy was studying in college, a documentary film titled Audrey and Daisy was released on the Netflix streaming service. The film told the story of violence, bullying, harassment on social networks, and the detrimental consequences this can lead to in the future. Daisy became one of the main characters of the film and shared her story. However, the fate of the second heroine, Audrey Pott from California, turned out to be even more tragic. Almost the same thing happened to Audrey as to Daisy Coleman in 2012. But unlike Daisy, Audrey was unable to cope morally with what happened. The girl's photos quickly spread across the network. Both Audrey's friends and enemies saw them. The last post she left on her social media page contained the following words: "My life is ruined. The whole school knows. I will never get rid of this reputation. Everyone knows how bad I am. I want it all to end." 9 days later, Audrey took her own life. She could not withstand the humiliation that fell upon her from all sides. Audrey's parents were able to initiate a criminal case only 6 months after their daughter's death. The perpetrators, 3 boys, were sentenced to terms ranging from 30 to 45 days. Later, their families paid Audrey's parents about $1 million in moral compensation. Let's return to Daisy Coleman. In 2018, seeking to start life with a clean slate, the girl moved to the state of Colorado, where she got a job at a tattoo parlor. At the same time, she worked on creating a second film project, which focused on the process of her own recovery. However, in June 2018, Daisy faced another shock. Her mother Melinda and brother Tristan got into a car accident while driving to Daisy from their hometown. As a result of the accident, 19-year-old Tristan died. The circumstances of this tragedy remain unknown to this day. After losing her brother, Daisy published a post on social media in which she admitted that every day it became more and more difficult for her to keep her inner demons under control, to put on a smile, and to pretend that everything was fine. After Tristan's death, Daisy co-founded a charitable organization that supported victims of violence. She continued to share her personal tragedy and provide support to other people who found themselves in similar situations. In her publications, Daisy repeatedly talked about how sometimes it was difficult for her to cope with the thoughts swirling in her head. She struggled with emotional pain, panic attacks, and constant terrible memories. In the summer of 2020, 23-year-old Daisy Coleman began sharing disturbing details with her friends. She was being stalked by an unknown man who constantly sent her threats. The girl went to the police and filed a statement that a stranger had been following her since December 2019. Daisy desperately pleaded for help, but her pleas went unanswered. On Tuesday, August 4th, 2020, she published a tweet in which she admitted that she was afraid to leave the house. Daisy wrote that she couldn't even walk her dog or go to work because of the overwhelming fear. She also reported that she had lost her appetite and couldn't sleep. A few hours later, a new post from Daisy appeared on Facebook. She said that some man had approached her house and knocked on the door. The girl confessed that she was very scared. She suggested that this man might have previously stolen her keys, and now it would not be difficult for him to get into her home. In addition, Daisy reported that the unknown man had stolen her photos and registered on one of the sites, where he offered intimate services for money on her behalf. Melinda, Daisy's mother, upon stumbling upon her daughter's message on social media, immediately called the Colorado police asking them to check on the girl. At 4 p.m., officers arrived at Daisy's home. She let them into the house, and the police spent about an hour with her. The girl again told them about being stalked by an unknown man. The officers did not notice anything suspicious in Daisy's behavior. But shortly after the law enforcement officers left, 23-year-old Daisy Coleman contacted her boyfriend via video call. During the conversation, she suddenly took out a gun, pointed it at herself, and pulled the trigger. Her boyfriend did not immediately realize what had happened. The connection was cut off. Daisy stopped answering calls. Frightened, the young man dialed 911. When the police officers arrived at Daisy Coleman's house again at 8 p.m., they found the girl already dead. One of the police officers couldn't hold back and burst into tears at the sight. The girl had a fatal gunshot wound. She was lying in a pool of blood. Melinda, Daisy's mother, reported her daughter's death in a post on her social media page. She wrote, "Daisy was my best friend and a wonderful daughter. How I wish I could take her pain away. She never recovered from what those boys did to her back in school. It's just not fair. My girl is gone from us." The woman said that she had fought for Daisy and her mental health for many years. She believed that she had done everything possible for her beloved daughter. The mother also confirmed that in recent months, Daisy was indeed being stalked, and just recently, the girl found out that she would never be able to have children. After Daisy's death, the tattoo parlor where she worked was robbed. The perpetrator stole an album with Daisy's exclusive sketches and her tattoo machine. 4 months passed. In December 2020, 58-year-old Melinda Coleman published another heartfelt post on social media dedicated to her beloved daughter. And soon after, the woman took a gun in her hands and did the same as Daisy. Only 2 sons remained in the Coleman family, the older Charlie and the younger Logan. The charitable organization founded by Daisy organized a fundraiser to support the boys. It became known that Matthew Barnett's life and career were going well. After the death of Daisy and her mother Melinda, He expressed words of sympathy about the tragedy that befell the Coleman family. I hope that Daisy's story will be the impetus for change in our society. We must create a world in which no child will suffer from violence, where every voice will be heard, and every victim will receive support and justice. Thank you for being with me and listening to this difficult story. I love each and every one of you. May the memory of Daisy Coleman forever remain in our hearts as a reminder that love, compassion, and support are what make us human. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Meet the Dwayne twins, Allison and Ann. The women were born in Utica, New York. In 1978, they also had an older sister named Amy who was 3 years their senior. When the twin girls were 5 years old, their mother Miriam passed away, leaving them to grow up without maternal love and care. The girls were twins, almost identical in facial features and personalities, but there were differences between them. Allison had a more dominant personality and was a leader, while Anne, unlike her sister, was more reserved, balanced, sweet and kind. Like all twins, the girls did everything together, were inseparable, and sometimes it seemed abnormal how well they could sense each other, as if they had telepathy between them. They could understand what the other needed at any moment, or what the other was about to say before she said it. They were very close and loved each other dearly, but at the same time, there was a kind of toxic, perverse relationship between them, bordering on hatred. Those who knew the twins were amazed at how they could sense each other. If one started to speak, the other could finish her sister's sentences, but throughout their lives, the sisters would fight each other like crazy. Their lives were full of ups and downs, quarrels and terrible fights, then moments of love, and then it would all repeat. Of course, the absence of their mother left an imprint on them, but time passed, the sisters grew up, and in their teens, the girls became interested in yoga, which should have had a beneficial effect on the twins, calming them down and stopping their fights. Indeed, externally, everything seemed quite peaceful. The twins' fascination with yoga led them to the idea of starting their career by opening a joint yoga studio. They found a suitable place around Palm Beach, Florida, invested money, and in 2008 they opened a studio for those who wanted to practice yoga, called Double Power Yoga. This studio opened in 2008, existed for a fairly long period until 2014. The studio immediately became popular. Within 2 months, the yoga school had gained fame in the city, attracting a large number of people who wanted to practice, and the sisters became recognizable personalities, making acquaintances with influential people. The twins' business brought in a good income, and over time the sisters bought identical Porsche cars, which they drove around the city. The girls started living in an elite high-rise building in Palm Beach, dressing in fashionable salons, and continued to spread the idea of practicing yoga, telling everyone how much yoga can help in life. The sisters said that their yoga studio in Palm Beach was the heartbeat of the entire area. The yoga school was thriving, but behind the scenes, where outsiders couldn't see, the relationship between the sisters remained the same as in childhood. They quarreled and fought like teenage girls. As the twins' yoga studio was gaining popularity, they were approached with an offer to star in a reality show that would be about the studio run by twins, as well as about all the dramas in their lives. But for some reason, the release of this project stalled, but the producers, convincing the sisters that the show would definitely be released and that it would be necessary to show the sisters' success, persuaded the girls to rent a more beautiful and spacious premises for yoga classes, and the sisters followed this advice. Despite the fact that the show never materialized, the twins moved to a studio that was more pleasant for them, but the maintenance costs increased and they could no longer fully cover them. Getting a good fee for participating in the show didn't work out for the sisters, and the bills were huge. They gradually began to get into debt, which further aggravated the situation, and in 2014 it was decided to close the studio. The sisters closed the studio in a very peculiar way. They just left. The sisters just abandoned the classes, didn't show up at the studio, didn't pay the employees, didn't return people's money for their participation. And this angered society and turned it against the sisters, because those who came to practice at the studio felt simply robbed. Therefore, the twin sisters left the city and moved to Utah Park City, Utah, and also changed their names, as they planned to write a book in the future, and their names were too well known and frequently appeared on the internet. Because of the failure with the yoga studio, the sisters wanted to start from scratch. Allison changed her name to Alexandria, and Anne became Anastasia. Having settled in a new place, the girls opened another yoga studio, but they no longer had the same success as the first time. Their studio failed, and as a result, the twins found themselves in debt for $150,000 and became bankrupt. At the same time, the relocation, debts and bankruptcy were accompanied by stress and worries, and the twins began to quarrel more than usual, and to relieve stress, they began to resort to alcohol more often. According to eyewitnesses, while the girls lived in Utah Park City, neighbors repeatedly called the police on them because the sisters drank a lot, loudly argued and fought. Apparently, the twins were going through very difficult times during this period, were depressed, experiencing depression, and they didn't like living in Utah, so in the end, they packed all their things and went to the most beautiful place on earth, Hawaii. This was in 2015, and interestingly, when the twins said they were going to Hawaii, they added that they were going on a real pilgrimage, ride through holy places and want to search for the meaning of life. But as soon as the sisters reached their destination, they again faced problems and got into trouble. One time, or rather on Christmas Eve, Alexandria and Anastasia decided to celebrate Christmas in a fun way. As usual, they didn't know when to stop with alcohol. The feast took place in a restaurant where the girls got pretty drunk and of course quarreled. Having decided to go home, they, however, did not stop arguing and already near the car began to swear so fiercely that they lost control and drove into a ditch. This happened very close to the restaurant and the consequences could have been very serious. Fortunately, when the police arrived at the scene, the sisters had already gotten out of the car safe and sound. However, instead of calming down, they continued to swear and even began to insult the restaurant owner. Not understanding what was happening and why they were so angry with him, the sisters, in their drunken frenzy, even threatened him with violence, saying, "We will send the mafia to you. Let them deal with you." Of course, such behavior did not go unnoticed. The police detained the belligerent sisters for hooliganism. As a result, a fine, and it seems a certain sobering up, because after this incident they seemed to calm down a little. Further events showed that pleasant changes also took place in the life of the twins. In 2016, they both found boyfriends and started dating guys. For Alexandria, it was Lonnie Dickerson, and Anastasia started a relationship with Federico Bailey. It would seem that personal life was getting better and the sisters finally found their happiness. But not everything was so cloudless. Once Federico and Anastasia decided to go on a hike, Alexandria was supposed to stay at home. While preparing for the trip and stocking up on groceries at the supermarket, Anastasia accidentally took her sister's credit card instead of her own. Deciding not to use someone else's card, she went back home to get her own. But suddenly Alexandria for some reason changed her mind and decided that she also wanted to join the hike. It is worth noting that Federico, unlike the sisters, perfectly understood the problems associated with alcohol and tried to protect the girls from unnecessary temptation. Therefore, during this trip, he strictly forbade taking any alcoholic beverages with them. But Alexandria, as always, did her own thing. She secretly took a bottle of wine with her and hid it well in the car. When Federico discovered the forbidden alcohol, he was very upset and disappointed. This find caused considerable tension between the participants of the hike. Anastasia, in turn, got angry with her sister for such an irresponsible act. As we can see, even on vacation, in the company of their loved ones, the sisters could not get rid of their old habits and again found themselves in the epicenter of conflict. It would seem that a bottle of wine is a trifle, but it is from such trifles that serious problems often begin. And something tells me that this incident was just the tip of the iceberg. What other surprises did the Dwayne sisters have in store for their companions during this trip? I will note that after that tense scene with the wine, the company, which consisted of sisters Alexandria and Anastasia, as well as Anastasia's boyfriend Federico, finally reached their destination. The campsite where they stopped was located in a surprisingly picturesque area, surrounded by wonderful views of wildlife. While the girls were unpacking their things, Federico decided to freshen up after the long road and went to the nearest spring. However, when he returned to the camp, he was surprised to find that neither the sisters nor their car were anywhere to be seen. It's hard to even imagine what he felt at that moment: confusion, anxiety, perhaps even fear for his companions. As it later turned out, while Federico was away, Alexandria and Anastasia for some reason decided to get in the car and drive down the road that led to Hana. This highway, by the way, is considered one of the most beautiful in the world, but at the same time one of the most dangerous. It winds between the rocks, sometimes resembling a serpentine more than a road. On one side is a solid stone wall, on the other is an abyss that takes your breath away just by looking at it. In addition, the sharp turns on this road often do not allow you to see if someone is approaching from the opposite direction. And if we add to this the fact that the route is not always well maintained and there are potholes, it becomes clear that traveling on it is a real challenge for the driver. But it seems that the Dwayne sisters were little concerned about all these dangers. They boldly, if not carelessly, raced along the winding road, paying no attention to either the beauty around them or the risks that lurked at every turn. And all this because they were preoccupied with another argument. It's hard to even imagine what they could argue about at such a crucial moment, because it's obvious that on this road you need to be as attentive and careful as possible. But despite everything, the sisters managed to notice a lonely woman on the side of the road who obviously needed help. Without much thought, they decided to give her a ride. On the way, they asked the hitchhiker where she was heading, and then dropped her off where she asked. It would seem that this good deed should have slightly diffused the atmosphere between the sisters, but as it turned out, it was quite the opposite. As soon as the unfortunate passenger left the car, a simply terrible quarrel broke out between Alexandria and Anastasia, and it happened in the most dangerous place on one of the sharp turns. Later, one of the eyewitnesses of these events told me that he saw with his own eyes how in the car that was passing by, two girls were furiously waving their arms, punching each other with their fists and pulling each other's hair. The guy was dumbfounded by such a sight because he realized that these actions distracted the driver from driving the car, and on a road like the Raptahana out at any moment. But despite the danger of the situation, the eyewitness realized that he could not help in any way. Everything happened so quickly that he wouldn't even have time to react. All he had left was to watch helplessly as the girl at the wheel suddenly accelerated sharply, turned the steering wheel to the left, and the car, breaking off the cliff, flew into the abyss. According to experts, the car fell from a height of about 60 meters and landed right on a pile of sharp stones. The most amazing thing is that it was the only area around the cliff where there was no water. It seems as if some unknown force specifically directed the car to this particular spot. From the strong impact, the car overturned and fell on its roof, so that its license plates were facing the sky. And you know, in this tragic situation, there is one moment that can be called a real miracle. It turns out that the girls were not driving some small car, but a Ford Explorer, a fairly large vehicle. Experts say that if they had been in a smaller car, they would have had practically no chance of surviving. News of the accident spread like wildfire through the surrounding area. The route leading to Hana is quite popular, so people began to gather around the scene of the incident. Everyone looked down in horror at the mangled car lying among the rocks. Someone even called the rescue service by dialing 911. And here the second amazing moment in this story happened. The people who had gathered on the cliff suddenly noticed that someone was moving in the car. It was an almost unbelievable piece of news. It turns out that after such a terrible fall, someone still survived. The police, who arrived at the scene of the accident, immediately began to question numerous witnesses, trying to find out what had happened. And one detail immediately caught their attention. It turns out that on the road surface, there were clearly visible traces of tires from the Dwayne sisters' car. But the strangest thing is that these traces had no signs of braking before the car flew off the cliff. On the contrary, everything indicated that the driver deliberately accelerated and directed the car straight to the edge of the cliff. You must agree that such things do not happen by chance. Meanwhile, rescuers were delivered by helicopter to the scene of the tragedy to check if anyone was left alive in the twisted car. What they saw in the car interior shocked even experienced experts. One of the sisters, Anastasia, was dead. Her body had numerous fractures, and one of the paramedics even compared it to a bag filled with bone fragments. But the real miracle was that the second sister, Alexandria, survived. True, she also had a lot of serious injuries, several broken ribs and a damaged arm. But despite everything, when the girl was pulled out of the wrecked car, she was able to stand on her own feet. And here we come to the most mysterious moment of this story. When the rescuers freed Alexandria from the car, they noticed that she had a lock of blonde hair clenched in her hand, the same color as her dead sister's hair. Most likely, this hair was torn out during the fight that the random eyewitness saw shortly before the accident. But what shocked the investigators the most was Alexandria's behavior. She did not look either frightened or upset about what had just happened. It seemed that the girl was not at all bothered by the fact that she had just miraculously escaped after the car fell from the cliff. And most oddly, she never once asked about her sister's condition, did not ask if Anastasia had survived. Alexandria did not cry, did not sob, did not show her emotions at all. You must agree that such a reaction is on the verge of normal, and it was this that made the investigators wonder. Does this terrible accident hide some terrible secret? Perhaps what happened on the road to Hana was not an accident. After that fatal accident, Alexandria was immediately taken to the hospital, and it was there that she was found by the police, who arrived to conduct an interrogation. From the very beginning, it was clear that the girl was not too willing to cooperate with the investigation. She reluctantly answered questions, and her whole demeanor indicated irritation and dissatisfaction with the presence of the officers. Just imagine the first thing she said to them was, "Why are you here?" "You know, during my many years as a detective, I've interrogated a lot of witnesses and suspects, and usually people who have just experienced such a terrible tragedy behave differently. They may be shocked, scared, upset, but indifference is the last thing you expect in such a situation." And another detail that surprised me a lot during the entire conversation with the police officers, Alexandria never once asked about her sister's condition. No worries, no anxiety, absolutely nothing. In the end, the investigators had to inform the girl about Anastasia's death themselves. And you know what struck me the most? The complete absence of any reaction from Alexandria. She listened to this terrible news with a completely empty, indifferent look without a hint of emotion. You must agree that this is more like the behavior of a person who has long come to terms with the loss, and not one who has just lost the closest person in an instant. But Alexandria's strange reaction is not the biggest surprise in this story. When the twins' father found out about the tragedy, his first words were, "It's a pity that the wrong sister died." That's right, you didn't mishear. The man actually regretted that Anastasia died in the accident, and not Alexandria. Such an attitude towards one's own children is, to put it mildly, alarming. Meanwhile, the police continued the investigation and quickly found out that the sisters were fighting right in the car before the accident. This information made the investigators wonder, was the car's fall from the cliff actually Alexandria's deliberate act? Maybe she purposely directed the car towards the abyss to get rid of her sister. Even more suspicions were aroused by the results of the tests, which showed that the level of alcohol in Alexandria's blood was 3 times higher than the permissible norm. That is, the girl was actually heavily drunk behind the wheel and had no right to drive at all, let alone go on such a dangerous trip. The situation was complicated by the fact that at the time of the accident, the girls had no documents with them. It was because of this that the police had to rely on Alexandria's words to establish the identity of the deceased. And the girl, meanwhile, was forced to go home to find her ID and prove that she was indeed herself. The investigators also turned to Lonnie Dickerson, Alexandria's boyfriend, with a request to confirm her identity. When Lonnie was told about the accident and Anastasia's death, his reaction was no less strange than Alexandria's. It seemed that this news did not touch him at all. He just looked at the police officers with an empty, indifferent look. But Federico, Anastasia's boyfriend, was completely unaware of the tragedy. He was still waiting for the girls at the campsite, not understanding where they could have gone. Only the next morning, having got to his friend's place in Hana by hitchhiking, Federico learned the terrible truth. The news of his beloved's death was a real shock for him. The guy was extremely upset and confused, but suddenly remembered something. And believe me, this information greatly interested the investigation. Undoubtedly, the information provided by Federico was a real sensation for the investigation. He said that a week before the tragedy, Alexandria openly stated her intention to kill Anastasia. Moreover, at one point she even said, "I got rid of her," as if the murder had already happened. Such words could not but cause serious concern. True, Federico could not say for sure the reason why Alexandria wished death to her sister. But he suggested that there was a very strong rivalry and mutual jealousy between the girls because of each other's successes. It was hard for the twins to come to terms with the fact that they were so similar in appearance, and this forced them to constantly compete and oppose each other. Federico said that the sisters were constantly trying to outdo each other to prove their uniqueness. It was as if they wanted to tell the world, "Look, we may look like 2 peas in a pod, but we are different personalities." But despite this, the girls could not stay away from each other for long. Their relationship was a strange combination of love and hate, tenderness and aggression. When they were together, they constantly quarreled and insulted each other, but as soon as they were apart, they already missed their other half. But the strangest thing is that Federico recalled that once, after another heated argument, Alexandria told him, as if in passing, "My sister and I will leave this planet on the 30th. When the guy heard this, he thought that maybe the girls had decided to commit suicide together. But life went on as usual, and gradually this phrase was erased from Federico's memory. Upon hearing such a confession, the investigators became seriously alarmed. A terrible picture began to emerge in their heads. Alexandria deliberately drove the car into the abyss to kill her sister. Of course, one could assume otherwise, for example, that the girls decided to settle scores with life together, or that it was just a tragic coincidence, an accident. But something told the detectives that the answer lay precisely in Alexandria's words, which Federico heard. So the investigators decided to take a closer look at the Dwayne sisters' car. Fortunately, it was a new, modern car with many technical gadgets, and most importantly, it had a black box like in airplanes. This device records all information about the movement of the car, speed, maneuvers, change of direction, and so on. Thanks to the data from the black box, it was possible to find out an extremely important detail. At the moment the car fell, the brakes were not used. That is, the car was flying off the cliff at full speed. No one even tried to stop, or at least slow down. For the investigators, this was direct evidence that the accident was not an accident. Suspicions were intensified by the fact that the car fell into the abyss exactly where there were only sharp stones at the bottom and not water. It seemed as if someone had specifically chosen this spot for the fall. Moreover, it was here, on this stretch of road, that for some reason there was no protective fence. Everything seemed to come together for the implementation of someone's sinister plan. Experts made another interesting conclusion. Alexandria survived thanks to the deployment of airbags. But Anastasia was not so lucky. She jumped and bumped a lot in the cabin during the fall. Someone even suggested that if at the time of the accident the girl was pulling her sister by the hair, then Alexandria could quite possibly involuntarily turn the steering wheel and press the gas. Having received such testimony and evidence, the investigators decided to bring an official charge against Alexandria. There was only one question left: what motive pushed the girl to such a terrible act? It turns out that shortly before the tragedy, Federico and Anastasia were planning to open their own business on another Hawaiian island. And here we come to a possible motive for the crime. According to the testimony, Alexandria was extremely dissatisfied with the fact that her sister was going to leave her. The girl was so strongly opposed to parting with her twin that she may have decided to resort to the most radical measures. Having gathered all the circumstantial evidence, the investigation was finally able to bring an official charge against Alexandria, the intentional murder of her sister, that is, a second-degree crime. But when the police arrived to arrest the suspect, it turned out that she had already fled the house. It seems that the girl somehow guessed about the possible arrest and decided to hide from justice. But Alexandria apparently forgot about one simple thing: Maui is an island, and you can only leave it in two ways, by sea or by air. So it wasn't too difficult for the police to find out that the girl had booked a plane ticket and that her flight was about to depart. And you know, sometimes fate can be surprisingly ironic. By some coincidence, it was on this plane that a mechanical malfunction occurred and the departure had to be postponed. So instead of being hundreds of kilometers away from the crime scene, Alexandria was forced to stay very close, but she went to wait it out in a nearby hotel. And there she was eventually found and arrested by the police. During the preliminary hearing of the case, Alexandria did not plead guilty to the murder of her sister. And here I would like to draw your attention to one detail. In the footage from the courtroom, you can see that the suspect's hand was not bandaged, although she had previously complained about an injury. Some of those present even suggested that Alexandria could have exaggerated the severity of her injury in order to arouse sympathy from others. The day of the substantive trial came. A large jury gathered on Maui, and Alexandria was officially charged with killing her sister. For this, the girl was taken to Hawaii to personally face justice. The process began on January 29, 2018. At first, Alexandria looked very excited and scared. No wonder, after all, she was facing life imprisonment. One of the key witnesses in this case was the same random passerby who saw with his own eyes how the sisters were fiercely fighting in the car shortly before the accident. The man described in detail what he saw: how Anastasia pulled her sister by the hair, pulled her head to herself, and punched her with her fists. This testimony formed the basis of the defense's version, according to which Alexandria, being behind the wheel, could have lost control of the car from pain and shock. Allegedly not seeing the road clearly due to her sister's attack, the girl could have unintentionally directed the car into the abyss. Then Federico, the deceased Anastasia's boyfriend, was questioned on the witness stand. He spoke about Alexandria's strange and disturbing behavior after the tragedy. According to him, the girl tried to establish closer contact with him, suggested taking a shower together, began to wear her sister's things. Federico admitted that he was shocked and repelled by such actions. Despite the outward resemblance to his beloved, he categorically refused to get close to Alexandria. But despite all this testimony, the suspect's lawyers insisted that it was Anastasia who caused the fatal accident. Allegedly, by attacking her sister, she provoked her to rash actions. The defense also referred to the results of the examination, according to which the car's wheel was changed shortly before the accident, so one of the tires was completely smooth. Given that the road was wet that day, and the sister's car was initially swaying due to the fight inside the cabin, it could well have happened that Alexandria simply could not cope with driving on the slippery road. So the court faced a difficult question. What really happened that fatal day on the road to Hana? Was the accident really an accident caused by a combination of factors, or was there a malicious intent behind it? And most importantly, is Alexandria guilty of her sister's death? The answer to these questions was to be given by the jury. So after hearing all the available evidence, the judge reached a conclusion and announced his decision. According to it, Alexandria was not responsible for the accident and the death of her sister, and therefore she was immediately acquitted. In the judge's opinion, the accused lost control of the vehicle, and perhaps she did indeed turn on the left turn signal. But even if she did, the evidence shows that the car was being heavily shaken from side to side due to the fight inside the cabin. The judge noted that the mere probability that Alexandria could have driven the car into the abyss is not sufficient for a guilty verdict. This requires strong and indisputable evidence of intent, and in this case they were absent. Instead, eyewitness accounts and expert findings rather indicated that the accident was the result of a fatal coincidence of circumstances: bad weather conditions, a slippery road, lack of fencing in a dangerous area, and most importantly, a merciless fight between the sisters that distracted the driver from driving. As a detective, this court decision seems rather controversial to me. Is it possible to exclude intent in a situation where one sister openly threatened to kill the other? Can it be considered an accident that the crash occurred in the very place where there were only sharp rocks below? After all, isn't it strange that Alexandria, despite the death of her twin, behaved as if nothing special had happened? These questions will probably never have unambiguous answers. Opinions on Alexandria's guilt were divided. Some consider her a completely innocent victim of a tragic coincidence. For others, she remains the main suspect who managed to escape punishment by cunning. Alexandria herself insists on her non-involvement in what happened. According to her, she misses Anastasia very much and is deeply saddened by everything that happened. But whether she can be believed is another question.
On March 7, 2019, something horrific and mysterious happened in the Nevada desert. A local man driving through the desolate area noticed an abandoned car and immediately called the police. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, they saw that the car's windows and doors were smashed, as if someone had tried to escape from the inside. At first, it seemed that no one was inside, but they were alerted by the smell of decay coming from the trunk. Upon opening it, they discovered the body of a 71-year-old psychiatrist from California, Tom Burchard. Tom was a well-known and respected person who had dedicated his entire life to helping others. His patients adored him for his kindness and compassion, and his colleagues respected him for his professionalism. Unfortunately, Tom had no children of his own, although he was married. Perhaps that's why he immersed himself in work with troubled children and teenagers, trying to fill the void in his heart. In addition to psychiatry, Tom had another passion: magic. He was a member of the exclusive magicians club, the Magic Castle, and often entertained his young patients with tricks. He especially enjoyed turning a $1 bill into a $100 bill. This trick invariably caused delight and joy in children. If Tom found out that one of his patients' parents was having financial difficulties, he would give them this magic bill without hesitation. Thanks to his generosity and kindness, Tom became a true light in the lives of many disadvantaged children and their families. How did he end up in the trunk in the middle of the desert, hundreds of miles from home? I'll tell you all the details right now. Burchard's patients were many women who found themselves in difficult life circumstances. Single mothers suffering from drug addiction or forced to sell their bodies to feed their children. Tom sincerely cared about their fates and often offered financial assistance, even though it might have seemed unethical from the point of view of his profession. But one day in December 2000, when Tom was 52, his own life turned upside down. How, of course, upside down because he was Trump's psychologist. Sorry, a bad joke. His wife found out that he was secretly communicating with young girls on the internet, meeting with them and giving them money. She immediately filed for divorce, suspecting her husband of infidelity and sexual relations with his patients. Tom denied any illegal actions and insisted that he was guided solely by the desire to help women in need. However, his reputation was tarnished, and his motives were incomprehensible to those around him. It seemed that at this point, Dr. Burchard's personal life had finally collapsed. But during a vacation in Las Vegas in 2022, he met Jodi, a 42-year-old divorced mother of 4. Despite the age difference, they quickly found common ground. Both did not drink alcohol, spent time by the pool, went to concerts, and even promised each other to meet again. Soon, Jodi moved in with Tom in the small town of Salinas. They lived together in a cozy country house, and it seemed that the doctor had finally found his happiness. Jodi's children became a real family for him, which he had never had. In 2017, Dr. Burchard's wife took another unexpected turn. Through the internet, he met 24-year-old Kelsey Turner, a young and ambitious girl with a difficult fate. Kelsey was born on May 5, 1993 in Norfolk, Virginia. At the age of 22, she decided to radically change her life and moved to sunny California with the dream of becoming a successful model. On social media, the girl created the image of a bad Barbie, a sexy and daring beauty who is not afraid to break the rules. It seemed that fate itself smiled upon Kelsey. She began posing for such famous men's magazines as Playboy and Maxim. Once, some of her photos from those days fell into my hands. I must admit, the girl was really stunning. A slender figure, lush white curls, a magnetic gaze. Men love such women. But as is often the case, a completely different reality was hidden behind the glossy cover. It turned out that despite her popularity on the internet, and Kelsey had over 100,000 subscribers, her modeling career never took off, and she already had 2 children from different men, a boy and a girl. The first pregnancy occurred when Kelsey was only 17, but the boy who was the child's father quickly disappeared from her life immediately after the birth of her daughter. In 2014, Turner made another attempt to establish her personal life. She got married and gave birth to a son. But this marriage also broke up very quickly, leaving Kelsey a single mother with 2 children in her arms and a lot of debts. And so yesterday she was a star of the network, and today she is a destitute, homeless woman who barely makes ends meet. It was probably at this moment of despair that she met Dr. Burchard. Having learned about Kelsey's difficult circumstances, Thomas offered to rent an apartment for her and the children for $3,000 a month.
He not only paid the deposit, but also paid for housing for a whole year and gave money for daily expenses. And all this was from his own pocket, without demanding anything in return. Of course, such a gesture can be assessed in different ways. Some will see it as a manifestation of sincere mercy, others as another proof of the doctor's strange inclinations in relations with young women. But from the point of view of the investigation, the fact itself is important. A 71-year-old respected psychiatrist suddenly decided to sponsor the life of a failed model and her 2 children. Why? And wasn't it part of some kind of intricate manipulation on Kelsey's part? As it turned out later, Kelsey was far from the only young woman patronized by 71-year-old Dr. Burchard. There were a good dozen of them, and they all gladly took advantage of the generosity of the elderly psychiatrist. But it seems that even among them, Kelsey stood out with her special appetites. No one else demanded such exorbitant sums from Tom. Jodi, of course, knew about her husband's charitable impulses, and he himself did not hide it. However, Tom's relationship with Kelsey was becoming increasingly tense. Despite the crazy money he gave her supposedly for the maintenance of children, the girl's appetites grew incessantly. On social networks, she flaunted photos from noisy parties in the company of friends and did not even think about changing her lifestyle. Jodi finally came to her senses. Kelsey was shamelessly exploiting Tom's kindness, manipulating his feelings. She begged her husband to stop sponsoring the girl, but he had already managed to throw $300,000 down the drain. Every week, Kelsey received money from him for renting a home, refueling a car, and her own whims. And all these expenses instantly turned into drinking and partying. Even a saint would lose patience here. But for some reason, Tom also needed pressure from Jodi to finally come to his senses and stop paying for Kelsey's dissolute life. He warned the landlord that he would give the money only for the next 3 months, and then let the girl manage on her own. Of course, Kelsey did not like this. She suddenly lost her main breadwinner. Her fury fell not only on Tom, but also on that bitch Jodi, who, oh horror, dared to open her husband's eyes. In messages, the girl promised to kill her rival and included her in the blacklist. Feeling that Tom was moving away, Kelsey resorted to outright blackmail. She threatened to call the police and say that he was a pedophile, thereby ruining his career and reputation. A person frightened by scandal is easy prey for manipulators. Tom was afraid of gossip and condemnation, but luckily Jodi was there to support him in a difficult moment. I must admit that even I, a seasoned cop, got the creeps from this story.
It's hard to believe that a young girl can be so insidious and merciless, and all for the sake of easy money. After Thomas stopped paying the rent for Kelsey's apartment, she was evicted in November 2018. It would seem that their relationship should have ended there, but not at all. The girl continued to terrorize the elderly doctor with threats, and in the end, he agreed to give her money for the last time just to get rid of her forever. Kelsey told Tom a sad story that social services had taken away her daughter, and now she wants to leave the city. In December 2018, she moved to Las Vegas, Nevada. At that time, Thomas decided to stop all communication with her.
But Kelsey herself did not waste time. Barely arriving in Vegas, she met some Greg, and right after Christmas, they started living together. However, the relationship of this couple was, to put it mildly, turbulent. The police visited their home several times because of domestic violence, and Greg was even arrested. But Kelsey did not grieve alone for long. Already in February 2019, she found herself a new boyfriend, John Logan Kenninson, an extremely dubious personality. He had just been released from prison, where he was serving a sentence for drug distribution, and immediately occupied Kelsey's home. And then Dr. Burchard, who was in Vegas at a medical conference at the time, behaved extremely strangely. Despite all of Kelsey's previous threats, he met with her. Excuse me, I can't help but add, but don't all Trump supporters always want to go back to the way things used to be? A coincidence? I don't think so. It seems that the elderly man simply could not erase the girl from his life. Upon returning to California, he began to help her again, this time with money. And all because Kelsey wrote to him that her new roommate was beating her and begged for help for herself and her son. Thomas, of course, became seriously alarmed. But he decided not to tell Jodi the truth. He lied that he was going to some magic show. On March 1, 2019, he flew to Las Vegas to see with his own eyes what was happening to Kelsey. It turned out that the girl lives in the house not only with her son and a sadist roommate. They also had a tenant, a certain Diana Pena, a 30-year-old waitress. She lived for free in exchange for babysitting Kelsey's son. In addition to this strange company, a not-quite-sewn-on guy named Jeremy also lived in the house. He occupied a room on the first floor. And so Kelsey introduces Dr. Burchard to all these people, supposedly her good acquaintance, almost a benefactor who is in love with her. Of course, such an explanation caused surprise and bewilderment among the roommates. But Kelsey herself vehemently denied any romantic connection. They say the man is just incredibly generous. That's why he helps. And it seemed that everything was fine. But on the very first night of Thomas's stay in the house, an unfortunate surprise happened. Jeremy's girlfriend appeared on the doorstep, blonde, drunk, and obviously not averse to flirting with a wealthy guest. And he, why sin to conceal, was partial to young beauties. Kelsey terribly disliked this. Apparently, she was afraid that a random rival would take away her sponsor. And without an influx of fresh dollars, Kelsey's usual way of life with drinking and partying was under threat. That evening, Thomas and Jeremy's girlfriend decided to go to the store. Dr. Burchard got behind the wheel as he did not drink alcohol. But Kelsey, consumed by jealousy, began to accuse her companion of deliberately creating discord in her relationship with Thomas. Jeremy seemed to feel the growing tension. Upon returning home, he hastily packed his things and left the house with his girlfriend, apparently so as not to aggravate the situation. Meanwhile, Thomas sent Jodi a message. He explained that he came to Kelsey to clarify the situation and find out the truth. He promised to stay for the weekend and return home on March 4th. Jodi was seriously worried about her husband. She knew better than anyone what Kelsey was capable of in her cruelty and manipulations. And Thomas, honest and trusting, would hardly be able to stand up for himself. She desperately begged him to return and never meet Kelsey again. After all, that girl, in Jodi's opinion, was a dangerous person in an extremely unstable state. But all persuasion was in vain. Thomas did not listen to his wife. And as it turned out, that message was the last one Jodi received from her beloved husband. After that, Thomas stopped communicating, and his phone was turned off altogether. Alarming premonitions did not leave Jodi. She knew that her husband was suffering from early dementia, which made the situation even more dramatic. Sometimes Thomas could not find his car in the parking lot or lost things, and sometimes he even forgot the way home or did not recognize Jodi's daughter. In addition, Dr. Burchard had a significant amount of cash with him, about $1,000, and also a diary where he wrote down everything he forgot, including passwords. Jodi was afraid that her husband could be robbed or that he simply got lost in a strange city. She contacted the police 3 times, sharing her fears and suspicions. She told law enforcement officers that Thomas had gone to Kelsey and even gave them the girl's address. She noted that she had already demonstrated her cruelty more than once and was unlikely to stop using the generosity of her trusting husband. Jodi was convinced that something had happened to Tom after all. He did not return when he promised. The police visited Kelsey's house several times, but to no avail. There was no one there. Only during the last visit, they noticed some strange details. The lights were on in the windows, the blinds were open, and the mailbox was completely stuffed with letters. The front door was unlocked. Going inside, the cops found no one. Only the pungent smell of cleaning products wafting through the air seemed extremely suspicious to them. Deciding not to touch potential evidence, law enforcement officers left the house. Having contacted the owner of the dwelling, the police found out little. The man only confirmed the fact that someone had paid for 3 months' rent in advance, and that neither Kelsey nor Thomas were at home. Well, in light of these circumstances, the cops simply had no other choice. They obtained a search warrant for Kelsey's home, hoping to find at least some clues in this confusing story. On the morning of March 7, 2019 at 10:50 a.m., an event occurred that became a turning point in this tangled story. Some men with children were driving along a deserted road in the Nevada desert. Suddenly, they noticed a Mercedes parked in a strange place. But it was not this that caught their attention, but the broken window of the car. Without hesitation, the concerned citizens called the police. When the patrol arrived at the scene, the cops thoroughly examined the vehicle. The windows and doors were damaged as if someone had forcibly tried to get out from the inside. After starting the engine and opening the trunk, the police saw some items. But what alarmed them the most was the smell of decay emanating from there. Under the blanket lay a mutilated male body with signs of brutal violence. In my years, I've seen plenty of horrific scenes at crime scenes. But what they did to this poor soul shocked even me, a seasoned cop. The forensic experts who arrived soon began to carefully study the car. Inside, latex gloves and cleaning supplies were found. Someone was clearly trying to remove evidence. Blood traces were also found on the driver's seat, although it was not easy to establish what exactly happened there. However, the overall picture was quite obvious. It seemed that the victim was attacked right in the car, and then, barely alive or already dead, was shoved into the trunk. The examination showed that the poor man was beaten to death, having received numerous blows to the head with a blunt object. In addition, numerous bruises, cuts, and scratches were found on the body. A particularly eerie detail was the missing part of the ear. Judging by the wounds on his hands, the man had desperately tried to defend himself. But in vain, a series of powerful blows to the head left him no chance. The first thing the police found out was the name of the car owner. It turned out to be none other than Kelsey Turner. The cops immediately linked the disappearance of Dr. Burchard with the found mutilated body. Having obtained a warrant, the investigators visited Kelsey's home with a search. Already on the spot, they found telling evidence. A bloody towel, identical to the one lying in the trunk of a Mercedes, traces of blood on broken doors, and most interestingly, cleaning supplies. It seemed as if someone had desperately tried to wipe the bloody stains off the floor. On March 15, the police finally received permission to arrest the main suspect. 2 weeks later, Kelsey Turner, who was hiding with her son in California at the time, was detained by FBI agents. The boy was sent to the care of a foster family, and the negligent mother was officially charged with murder. Her last roommate, John, was also taken into custody. It seemed that everything was clear, only the details remained. However, a real breakthrough in the investigation was the testimony of Diana, a neighbor and an involuntary participant in those terrible events. The woman herself came to the police along with her lawyer. In exchange for a mitigation of punishment, she told the investigators in detail everything that actually happened that fateful evening. I must admit, after hearing her testimony, even I, an old detective, was stunned by the ruthlessness and cold-bloodedness of the criminals. The second day of Dr. Burchard's visit to Kelsey in Vegas turned out to be fatal. Diana, as usual, was working at a local bar. Thomas and Kelsey came to pick her up after her shift. The doctor was driving, but he obviously had a poor sense of direction in the city and quickly got lost. Losing patience, Kelsey snatched his phone under the pretext of searching for a route. But having the device in her hands, she couldn't resist and began rummaging through Tom's messenger. And here she made an extremely unpleasant discovery. Among the messages were nude photos of her own mother, Samantha. Digging further, Kelsey found out shocking details. It turned out that her mother was also begging for money from the elderly psychiatrist. She must have touched him with some moving story from her difficult life, and the kind-hearted doctor, of course, fell for it. Upon learning about this, Kelsey went mad with rage. A barrage of insults and reproaches fell upon Thomas. The poor man was confused and did not know how to react to her frenzied attack. By some miracle, he still managed to get the car to the house without getting into an accident. But the adventures did not end there. At home, Kelsey continued to yell at Tom, calling him names. She threatened to expose his connection with her mother and ruin his reputation. To somehow hide from this verbal pressure, Thomas locked himself in her son's room. Fortunately, the boy was not at home that evening. He was staying overnight at a friend's place. However, Kelsey did not calm down. Now she was already demanding that Thomas pay a huge sum for her silence. The doctor could not stand it and slammed the door in anger. This sound infuriated John, who had been silently watching everything that was happening. Grabbing a baseball bat, he smashed the door of the room with a swing. Diana saw John rushing down the corridor like a mad beast. Then there was a dull thud, and a moment later she saw Thomas's body lying on the floor. A huge bruise was already swelling on his head. Puzzled by their own deed, John and Kelsey instantly fled, leaving the unconscious doctor to his fate. Diana rushed to help the poor man. She gave him water, tried to somehow bring him to his senses. Thomas barely realized what had happened. He was in deep shock. Diana understood that the man needed immediate medical attention. She wanted to take him to the hospital, but unfortunately, she did not know how to drive a car. Thomas was also unable to get behind the wheel. We had to wait for Kelsey and John. There was simply no one else to count on. But the couple was in no hurry to rescue their victim. On the contrary, the exhausted Thomas whispered a terrible thing to Diana, most likely. These two were planning to kill him. A moment later, Kelsey returned. Cynically stating that she would take Tom to the hospital, she began hastily wiping away all traces of the attack. The frightened Diana rushed to wash the bloodied floor. At the same time, she heard Thomas desperately arguing with his tormentors in the garage. And then, through the noise, Kelsey's cold order to John reached her. "Hit him again." The girl rushed downstairs to stop the beast of a roommate. But alas, she did not make it in time. An innocent person was being brutally finished off right before her eyes, and no one was going to save the victim. Diana was in complete shock from what she saw. She froze in place, not knowing what to do next. Tears streamed down her face, but Kelsey did not give the girl even a minute to despair. Coldly ordering the subordinate to go back upstairs and erase the last traces of the crime, she herself began to carry the bloody body out of the house. Meanwhile, the police, called by one of the neighbors, were already banging on the door. Diana had every chance to stop this madness. It was enough just to open the door and tell the cops the truth. But the girl did not dare. She panicked and barricaded herself inside, hoping to wait out the danger. The next day, Kelsey took Thomas's mutilated body to the desert and left it in the trunk of his own car. Perhaps she hoped that in such a deserted place, exposure could be avoided, but she miscalculated. On March 21, Kelsey and her roommate John were finally arrested on suspicion of murder. The obstinate couple denied their involvement to the last, blaming each other. And here Diana's testimony played a key role. Thanks to a plea deal with the investigation, the girl was released on bail. Already in court, she fearlessly pointed to Kelsey and John as the direct killers of Thomas. The defenders of the defendants, of course, tried to tarnish the witness and downplay the significance of her testimony, but in vain. During the hearings, Kelsey always appeared in loose prison clothes, and no wonder she was in the last months of pregnancy with another, already third child. Who was the father of this baby remained a mystery. In the end, John surrendered first. He confessed to second-degree murder, admitting his part in the conspiracy. The court sentenced him to 45 years behind bars. Kelsey held out to the last, pretending to be an innocent victim of circumstances. Her own trial was scheduled for November 2022, but a moment before the start of the hearing, the woman suddenly changed her testimony. She also admitted guilt in second-degree murder. The sentence is 25 years in prison. Already in the cell, Kelsey gave birth to a daughter who was instantly transferred to the guardianship authorities. It seems that the child was lucky she will not see her insidious mother until she becomes an adult, and let that one rot behind bars. The investigation established that Kelsey was a clever swindler and a pathological liar. She cynically used the kind-hearted Thomas for money, and when she realized that the elderly doctor would no longer be her source of income, she decided to get rid of him. Kelsey's accusations of pedophilia against Dr. Burchard turned out to be completely unfounded. The police thoroughly examined the contents of his phone and other electronic devices, but did not find any evidence to support these horrific allegations. Yes, there were photos of naked women in his mobile phone's memory, but there were no images of children or minors among them. The investigators also unearthed the fact of intimate correspondence between Thomas and Kelsey with quite explicit photos. But since both were adults, these materials were considered inappropriate to be presented in court as evidence of the doctor's guilt. It is difficult to unequivocally assess the actions of Dr. Burchard. On the one hand, his relationships with young women and obsession with charity seem strange, to say the least, especially for a respectable man well over 70. But despite everything, Thomas was a kind, sensitive person who sincerely sought to help those in need, and his professional merits and good reputation are undeniable. Until the very end, his wife Jodi tried to protect the trusting Thomas from Kelsey's insidious encroachments. She repeatedly begged her husband to sever all ties with this girl. She felt that she was manipulating and using the elderly doctor for her own selfish purposes. Unfortunately, the man in love completely lost his mind and did not listen to her wise advice. And now I would like to draw your attention to another tragic aspect of this eerie story. To the fate of Kelsey's unfortunate children, a boy and 2 girls, whom she gave birth to from different men. Babies who were unlucky enough to be born to this irresponsible and cynical woman. She always put her own desires and whims above the needs and well-being of her offspring.
Thanks to Diana's testimony, it became known that Kelsey used children as a lever of influence on others. She asked for money allegedly for their maintenance, but she spent it on entertainment and drugs. She led a dissolute life, dragging the kids through dubious rented apartments and dens. Are these normal conditions for the growth and development of children? It's strange that social services did not take them away earlier. I'm afraid to imagine what traumas such upbringing will turn into for these kids. After all, they never had a chance to experience maternal warmth and genuine care. Their short life is continuous poverty, instability, and arbitrariness of an insidious mother. And the worst thing is that Kelsey's care was cut short in the most insidious way through the brutal murder of a person. Not the best example to follow. You know, such high-profile cases always make you wonder what is going on in the heads of such Kelseys. What pushes these young women to embark on a bloody path and drag the innocent with them? One thing I can say for sure, at the heart of their actions lies vile selfishness and the inability to take responsibility for their lives. They are not ready to be mothers, but they give birth to children. They do not want to work, but they strive for luxury and wealth. They manipulate, lie, and parasitize on the kindness of others. And when the victim shows character, they get rid of them at any cost. Thinking about Kelsey Turner, I can't get rid of the feeling of bitterness and disappointment. This woman is a prime example of what a mother should not be. She completely forgot about her most important duty to take care of the well-being and safety of her own children. Instead of creating a stable and loving environment for them, Kelsey turned the lives of her offspring into complete chaos. She dragged them through various boyfriends and dubious dwellings, while she herself was drinking and using drugs at this time. The kids lived in an atmosphere of constant fear, neglect, and deprivation. But even this did not prompt the negligent mother to come to her senses and change her behavior. She continued to make irresponsible decisions, obeying only her own impulsive desires, and she used the children as a lever for pressure and manipulation of others, including Dr. Burchard. Tragically, in the end, even Jodi could not protect the poor kids from the devastating influence of their mother. Social services also lacked the determination to take them out of the toxic environment. One can only imagine what traumas and complexes such upbringing inflicted on them for life. In this bloody drama, Dr. Thomas Burchard found himself a hostage to his own good intentions. Despite some controversial traits of his personality, he was a kind and sensitive person who sincerely sought to help those in need. He did not deserve such a cruel and untimely death at the hands of an insidious fraudster whom he unreservedly trusted. This case has become a chilling confirmation of the old truth. Sometimes excessive kindness, generosity, and trust turn against the benefactor himself. Not everyone who reaches out for help is guided by pure thoughts. Some, like Kelsey, only need money and the opportunity to parasitize on other people's resources.
Of course, it's easy to judge the victim from the height of lived years and one's own experience, like it was necessary to think with your head, not your heart. Do not succumb to the manipulation and threats of a scammer. But Thomas, it seems, simply could not do otherwise. His humanity, sincerity, and compassion for the disadvantaged became both his greatest virtue and his fatal mistake. Now we can only hope that Kelsey's orphan children will find comfort in a new loving family, that some kind people will take them under their wing and give them the peace, comfort, and care that these babies have been deprived of since birth. Perhaps this will somewhat compensate them for the traumatic past and help them grow into worthy individuals. As for Dr. Thomas Burchard, he will undoubtedly remain forever in the memory of those he managed to help during his lifetime. His bright soul, selflessness, and desire to give good will definitely not be forgotten. And although these amazing qualities eventually ruined Thomas, they also turned him into a real guardian angel for many unfortunate and disadvantaged people. They say that true kindness does not need gratitude or recognition. It does not expect anything in return, but simply does the right thing at the call of the heart. Probably this is exactly what our deceased doctor was, a generous soul in a soulless world of human cruelty and self-interest. And although his earthly path ended too early and tragically, I want to believe that there, in the afterlife, Thomas finally found the peace and love that he sometimes lacked during his lifetime. And we, the cops, will just do our job. We will punish the guilty so that the death of this bright man is not in vain. It's hard to put an end to such high-profile cases, because despite the arrests and trials, some bitter injustice remains, as if evil once again prevailed, and we again could not prevent a bloody denouement. But despite everything, I believe that every good deed, every rescue, and every punished abomination makes this world at least a little better and safer. And even if we are not given to eradicate all the evil, at least we do not allow it to prevail completely. The story of Dr. Burchard will become another sad but important brick in the wall of human memory. A warning for some and an inspiration for others. A reminder that evil is always near, but good does not disappear either. The main thing is not to lose humanity and compassion, even in the face of the most terrible trials. This is Travis, a young man born on July 28, 1977 in sunny California, was a sales department employee. His parents were Hora David and Lisa Butt Morgan, an ordinary American family. One September day in 26, fate brought Travis together with an aspiring photographer, a 26-year-old blonde named Jodi Arias. It happened at a professional conference in vibrant Las Vegas, dedicated to prepaid and legal services, where Travis was representing his company. Jodi Arias, despite her young age, was already actively seeking opportunities to collaborate with a company where Travis worked. Their acquaintance happened spontaneously, but from the first minutes there was an incredible chemistry between them. They communicated perfectly, as if they had known each other all their lives, and seemed to have a lot in common. Wanting to continue their communication in a more private setting, Travis invited Jodi to his company's official dinner as his personal guest. It was there, amidst business conversations and glasses of wine, that a spark ignited between them, which later grew into a passionate romance. Jodi was enchanted by Travis's sense of humor, ease, and cheerful disposition. Next to him, she felt comfortable and carefree, forgetting about all her troubles. Their meetings became regular, filled with laughter, passion, and dreams of a shared future. As an experienced detective, I would note that often it is precisely such seemingly perfect acquaintances that can lead to unpredictable and even tragic consequences. Behind the mask of attractiveness and friendliness, dark secrets and dangerous intentions can hide. However, at that moment, nothing foreshadowed trouble. The lovers enjoyed each other's company, making plans for the future and not suspecting what a dramatic turn their relationship would take. From the outside, it seemed that Travis and Jodi were a perfect couple, created by fate itself. They complemented each other, shared common interests and dreams. However, as practice shows, often behind the ideal facade, deep cracks hide that can destroy even the strongest relationships. And this case was no exception. After that fateful acquaintance at the conference, Jodi decided to end her relationship with her then-boyfriend and dive headfirst into a romance with Travis. However, distance stood in the way of their happiness. The lovers lived in different states. Travis lived in another region, while Jodi remained in Palm Desert, California. But this did not become an obstacle to their feelings, and they continued to keep in touch despite the geographical remoteness. According to one of Travis' friends, Jodi made the impression of a very attractive and friendly girl. Her long blonde hair and slender figure could not leave any man indifferent. During a joint dinner with Travis, they constantly talked about something, and from the outside, it seemed that a genuine mutual affection had arisen between them. Travis and Jodi's relationship developed rapidly, despite the distance. They constantly communicated by phone, exchanged messages, and tried to see each other in person as often as possible. It seemed that nothing could overshadow their happiness. However, I would note that not all of Travis' friends shared his admiration for the new girl. Some of them, who had the chance to get to know Jodi better and observe the development of their relationship, felt a certain uneasiness. Perhaps it was some kind of sixth sense that hinted that something disturbing was hiding behind Jodi's attractive appearance and sweet smile. But lovers rarely listen to the advice of friends, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. Travis was so enchanted by Jodi that he did not pay attention to the warnings of those around him. He was convinced that he had found his true love and was ready to fight for this relationship no matter what. As practice shows, often at the beginning of a romance, during the so-called rose-colored glasses period, lovers do not notice obvious alarming signs in the behavior of their other half. They idealize their partner, attributing desired qualities to them and ignoring potential flaws. And only with time, when the euphoria subsides and the relationship reaches a new level, true faces and intentions begin to reveal themselves. But despite all the warnings, Travis and Jodi continued to enjoy their romance. They made plans for the future, dreamed of a life together, and were ready to overcome any obstacles on the way to their happiness. However, as time will tell, sometimes the greatest danger lurks from those we love the most. And right now, the crack in the relationship that I will tell you about will happen. The more people hear this story, the more people can draw conclusions for themselves and protect themselves from similar circumstances. This is very important. Despite the passionate feelings and plans for a shared future, after 5 months, Jodi and Travis' relationship reached a dead end. They decided to break up, but as often happens in such cases, they could not completely sever the connection. The former lovers continued to maintain physical intimacy and communicate as if nothing had changed. At first, it seemed that such a format of the relationship suited them perfectly. They remained a part of each other's lives, but without burdensome obligations and promises. But everything changed when Travis started dating another woman. The news of her ex-boyfriend's new passion came as a real blow to Jodi. She could not come to terms with the thought that Travis now belonged to another. Jealousy clouded her mind, pushing her to reckless actions. Jodi began to obsessively follow Travis' life on social media. She hacked his accounts, read private correspondence, trying to find even the slightest hint of his new relationship. It became a kind of obsession for her, absorbing all her thoughts and actions. Once Travis, seemingly jokingly but with a note of anxiety, said to his friend, "Don't be surprised if one day you find me dead." Perhaps deep down, he already felt that Jodi's obsession could have fatal consequences. I can say that such jokes are often a kind of cry for help. People who find themselves in toxic and dangerous relationships sometimes unconsciously send signals to others, hoping that someone will intervene and save them from the threat. But at that moment, neither Travis himself nor his friends gave proper significance to this joke. They attributed it to Jodi's eccentricity and did not perceive her behavior as a real danger. Months passed and Jodi's obsession only intensified. She gave Travis no peace, stalked him, threw tantrums and caused scandals. Eventually, at the end of May 2008, tired of her endless antics, Travis gave Jodi an ultimatum. Either she leaves his life forever or he will be forced to take radical measures. But was Jodi ready to let go of her obsession so easily? Could she come to terms with the idea that Travis would never belong to her again? The answers to these questions will sound right now because at that point, all the alarm bells were ringing at full force, foreshadowing the tragic denouement of this story. At the beginning of 2008, Travis had grand plans. He organized a business trip to Mexico, which was to take place on June 15th. And interestingly, he initially planned this trip together with Jodi. It would seem to be an ideal opportunity for lovers to spend time together, combining work and leisure under the scorching Mexican sun. But in April, the situation changed dramatically. Travis suddenly informed Jodi that the plans had changed, and instead of her, he had decided to take another girl with him. We can only imagine what a blow this was for Jodi, who had already managed to paint a perfect picture of their joint trip in her imagination. And so, the night of June 2nd arrived. Around 2 o'clock, Jodi, unable to bear the tension, began calling Travis. She dialed his number 4 times in a row, but he stubbornly did not answer. Perhaps he already felt then that a conversation with Jodi would not bring anything good and tried to avoid conflict. The longest call lasted only 17 seconds. Imagine this picture. Jodi engulfed in jealousy and anger, pressing the call button again and again, and Travis, tired of her intrusiveness, simply looking at the phone screen, not daring to answer. But Jodi did not give up. She kept calling, and eventually Travis couldn't stand it. He answered her call, and they talked for 18 minutes at first, and then for another 41 minutes. One can only guess what they were talking about and how tense this conversation was. The last conversation between them lasted 2 minutes and 48 seconds. What was said in those nearly 3 minutes? Did Jodi try to convince Travis to change his plans one last time? Or maybe she was already threatening him with reprisals. Unfortunately, we will never know for sure. I have seen many similar cases. When one person obsessively pursues another, giving them no peace day or night, it can drive even the most resilient personality to despair. And unfortunately, such situations often end in tragedy. So we have every reason to assume that these nightly calls from Jodi became a kind of point of no return in her relationship with Travis. She could not come to terms with his decision to take another girl with him on the trip and was ready to do anything to hinder these plans. And Travis, in turn, was already tired of her constant tantrums and scandals and sought to break this toxic bond as soon as possible. After that fateful phone conversation with Travis, Jodi decided to act. She rented a car, intending to make a long trip to the state of Utah. At first, her path led through Southern California, where she visited her friends at a work conference. It would seem to be an ordinary stop along the way, but as it turned out later, it had far-reaching consequences. During her stay in California, Jodi met with Ryan Burns' Travis colleague, and it was from him that we learned several interesting details. It turns out that at the time of the meeting with Burns, Jodi's blonde hair had already been dyed dark chestnut. Moreover, Burns noticed cuts on her hands. A strange change of image and injuries, don't you think? It seems that Jodi was preparing for something important and tried to disguise her appearance. On June 6th, Jodi left California for Utah, stopping by the city of Alta along the way. All this time, she tried to contact Travis, leaving him numerous voice messages. Her obsession reached such a level that she even managed to gain access to the voicemail system of his mobile phone. One can only guess what words she left in those messages and whether they contained threats against Travis. When returning the rented car, Jodi had to explain a few strange things. First, according to the seller, the car managed to accumulate about 3,000 miles in a short period of time. Second, the rental clerk noticed the absence of floor mats in the cabin and the presence of suspicious red stains on the seats. However, unfortunately, these stains were never thoroughly investigated, as the company rushed to clean the car before the police examined it. As an experienced detective, I cannot help but note that all these details raise serious suspicions. Why did Jodi need to change her appearance so drastically? Why were there cuts on her hands? And most importantly, what were the mysterious red stains found in the car she rented? All these questions suggest that something sinister is hiding behind Jodi's outward decency. Of course, at that moment, no one could have predicted what tragic events this seemingly ordinary trip would lead to. But from the height of the years lived and taking into account all the circumstances of the case, we can say with confidence that it was during that period that Jodi embarked on a dark path from which there was no turning back. So let's set aside these alarming details for now and move a few days forward, when Travis' friends sounded the alarm, unable to contact him. It was their persistence and concern that led to the terrible discovery that forever changed the course of this story. On June 9th, Travis' friends sounded the alarm. They had not been able to contact him for several days, which was extremely unusual for such a communicative person. Even his roommates had not seen Travis during this time, simply thinking that he had gone somewhere on business. But the friends' concern grew with each passing hour, and they decided to visit his home to check if everything was all right. What they saw upon entering Travis' apartment was forever etched in their memory. There was a huge pool of blood on the floor, and Travis' body itself lay in the shower. It is hard to even imagine the shock and horror that gripped his friends at that moment. Without wasting a second, they called 911, summoning emergency services. The dispatcher, taking the call, asked standard questions. One of them concerned whether Travis was prone to suicide. Of course, his friends rejected such a possibility. They knew Travis as a cheerful and positive person who would never take such a step. Another question was more alarming. Was there anyone from Travis' circle who might wish him harm? And then Travis' friends remembered Jodi Arias, Travis' ex-girlfriend. They said that she literally stalked him, was wildly jealous, and even resorted to such extremes as hacking his Facebook page and damaging the tires of his car. It seemed that Jodi was obsessed with Travis and could not come to terms with the fact that he had left her. As a detective with many years of experience, I immediately realized that this information could be key to the investigation. Obsession and aggressive behavior of former partners often lead to tragic consequences, and although at that moment it was still too early to draw final conclusions, Jodi Arias automatically fell into the list of main suspects. Of course, investigators could not rule out other versions. Perhaps Travis had some enemies that even his closest friends did not know about, or it could have been an ordinary robbery gone wrong. But with each new detail, with each new fact that surfaced during the investigation, the arrow of suspicion increasingly pointed towards Jodi. Now the cops needed to act quickly and in a coordinated manner. Interrogate all possible witnesses, gather evidence, track the movements of suspects. Every minute was worth its weight in gold because the killer was still at large and could strike again at any moment. When the detectives arrived at the crime scene and began a thorough search of Travis' apartment, one of the first finds made us shudder. A camera was found in the washing machine. At first glance, nothing strange nowadays. Many people have digital cameras. But during further investigation, it turned out that this camera had been purchased quite recently, and most importantly, it was damaged. Such details immediately made us wary. Later, technical experts set about restoring the data from the camera, and what they found came as a real shock. In the recovered images, we saw Jodi Arias and Travis in rather intimate poses. The pictures were dated June 4th around 2 p.m. It turns out that on that day, Jodi was in Travis' apartment, and more than just a friendly meeting was taking place between them. But the most shocking thing was that the camera contained photographs of Travis immediately before the murder, during it, and even after. It was like some kind of eerie photo report taken by the killer himself. The last photo in which Travis was still alive was taken at 5:29 p.m. on the same day, and literally a few minutes later, the camera captured bloody scenes in his bathroom. In these terrible pictures, one could make out the silhouette of a person, probably Travis, lying on the floor in a pool of his own blood. The red liquid spread across the floor, creating eerie patterns, and on the wall of the corridor leading to the bathroom, a bloody handprint was clearly visible. Later, the examination showed that the print contained mixed DNA of both Jodi and Travis. In fact, investigators obtained irrefutable evidence that Jodi Arias was present at the crime scene at the time of Travis' murder. Her intimate photos with the victim and taken just a few hours before his death, as well as her handprints at the crime scene, all this spoke in favor of the fact that she was the main suspect. It was necessary to carefully analyze each photograph, each detail, in order to reconstruct an accurate picture of the events of that fatal day. But even then, we felt that we had taken a huge step towards solving this horrific crime. Now law enforcement had not just the testimony of friends about Jodi's obsession and aggressive behavior. In their hands were photographs that irrefutably proved her involvement in the murder, and although there was still a lot of work ahead of us, we were filled with determination to see the case through to the end and bring the perpetrators to justice. Only one question remained: why? What could have pushed a young woman to commit such a terrible crime? Love, jealousy, hatred. Or maybe there was something more behind this, something we did not yet understand. Believe me, what happened next just shocked me. July 15, 2008 became a decisive day in this case. It was then, based on the evidence gathered, that Jodi Arias was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. What happened next can boldly be called a theater of the absurd. At first, Jodi completely denied her presence in the city on the day of the crime. She claimed that the last time she saw Travis was back in March of that year. Imagine the shock we felt upon hearing such outright lies. After all, we had irrefutable evidence in our hands that it was on June 4th that Jodi was in Travis' apartment, and not just there, but had an intimate relationship with him. But the most impressive thing was that Jodi managed to stick to this false version for a whole 2 years. Only after such a long time, realizing perhaps that her position did not stand up to any criticism, she suddenly changed her testimony. Now she claimed that she was indeed in Travis' apartment on the night of the murder, but only because he himself had called her. Eventually, in March 2013, after long weeks of trial, Jodi Arias was found guilty of premeditated first-degree murder. The jury could not come to a unanimous decision on the death penalty, so Jodi was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. But even behind bars, this woman continued to amaze with her behavior. During interrogations, she could suddenly start singing, laughing, talking to herself, or even doing a handstand. It was so strange and inappropriate that even seasoned guards could not contain their surprise. But perhaps the most shocking thing for me was the fact that Jodi attended Travis' memorial service. She came there, although she knew for sure that everyone suspected her of this terrible murder. And the whole time, while Travis' friends and relatives were mourning his death, Jodi sat with a stone face. She did not shed a single tear, did not show any sympathy. It seemed that she was not at all worried about the grief of other people. Now Jodi Arias is serving her sentence in the Arizona State Prison Complex. And even there, she manages to be in the spotlight. Recently, in one interview, she said that she receives a lot of love from fans behind bars. "There is so much love in my direction that I can't even respond to it now," she said with a smile. In April 2019, Jodi filed an appeal against her sentence, claiming that she did not receive a fair trial. But on March 24, 2020, the Arizona Court of Appeals upheld the verdict without changes. Thus ended one of the loudest and most scandalous criminal cases in US history.
I just want to make it clear that I've never had intentions of taking my twin sister's life. And if I could take back what I did, I would in a heartbeat.
On January 8, 1992, an extraordinary event took place in the city of Camden, New Jersey. Identical twin girls Amanda and Anna Ramirez were born into the world. The girls arrived just minutes apart, like two little angels entering this life hand in hand.
From their very first days, the sisters shared a special bond that only grew stronger over the years. The girls' parents, immigrants from Puerto Rico, had built a large, loving family in pursuit of a better life. Despite the hardships they faced on their journey to the American dream, they managed to keep their home warm and united. Amanda and Anna grew up surrounded by older siblings, with younger sisters arriving later. Yet the twins stood out from the rest with their uncanny resemblance and inseparable bond. From a very young age, the sisters were like two peas in a pod. They adored dressing alike, playing with identical toys, and spending every waking moment together. It seemed Amanda and Anna understood each other without words, sensing the other's moods and emotions. Even childhood squabbles were quickly forgotten as they became best friends again. I've seen photos of Amanda and Anna as children, and I must say their likeness is simply astonishing. It must have been challenging even for their parents to tell them apart at times. That closeness between sisters is unique, but it also had the potential to cause issues down the road. Watching Amanda and Anna during those years, one could only marvel at the strength of their connection. They were like two shoots of the same tree, reaching for each other, drawing strength and inspiration. Their parents and family took immense pride in their special girls and rejoiced that in this big, often harsh world, they had each other. Little did anyone know then what trials lay ahead and how their unique bond would impact the course of events. But in those carefree childhood days, everything seemed so simple and bright, with so many uncharted paths still to explore. The birth of twins is always something special, but Amanda and Anna's story is truly one of a kind. Their loving, close-knit upbringing built a strong foundation for their future lives. However, as we know, life often throws unexpected curveballs, and this case is a prime example of how even the strongest bonds can be tested by fate. From the very first days, Amanda and Anna's parents noticed their daughter's incredible bond that seemed to have formed in the womb itself. They recounted how in those early months, the sisters would even sleep in the same crib as though unable to be apart. This special connection only intensified over the years, forging Amanda and Anna into a true team. They did everything together, practically joined at the hip, unwaveringly following each other's every move. Observing them, I couldn't help but ponder just how powerful a twin bond can become and how it shapes their lives. The girl's mother, Mrs. Ramirez, warmly recalled how she nurtured the friendship between her daughters, wanting Amanda and Anna to forever remain each other's pillars, and the sisters did not disappoint. They learned to walk together, started preschool and school together, shared their most intimate secrets. It seemed nothing in this world could break their mighty sisterly union that only tempered with time. As a detective, I often encounter cases where close bonds between people become a trial for themselves and those around them. So Amanda and Anna's story piqued my interest, not just professionally, but also in understanding human nature. The parents shared that the twins had their own secret language for communicating with each other. At times, it was as if they could read each other's minds, anticipating the other's actions and desires. It was something unfathomable, like a telepathic link that existed only between the two of them. Even at school, teachers marveled at how Amanda and Anna could seamlessly complete each other's answers as one singular entity. This extraordinary sisterly bond inspired awe, but also raised concerns. Would it hinder their individual growth? Could the girls find their place in life alone, without their counterparts' constant presence? These were the questions that nagged not just the parents, but me as well as I delved into the details of this incredible story. Yet in childhood, it all seemed so idyllic. Amanda and Anna were blissfully happy together, and it appeared it would always be that way. They shared their most private dreams, supported each other's pursuits, rejoiced in successes and consoled failures. The sisters were two halves of a whole, unable to envision life without the other. Amanda and Anna grew up in an atmosphere of love, support, and unity. The large Ramirez family did everything in their power to provide the girls with a joyful, carefree childhood. The sisters played together, got into mischief together, attended family celebrations side by side. They adored dressing up in matching dresses and fooling those around them by pretending to be each other. Their parents smiled recounting those moments when even they couldn't tell their own daughters apart. It was a true test for everyone, but also a source of laughter and delight in the Ramirez household. At school, the twin sisters stuck together too. They excelled equally in nearly every subject, often doing each other's homework assignments. Yet teachers didn't scold Amanda and Anna too harshly for such antics, as the sisters demonstrated excellent grades and behavior. According to their school friends, Amanda and Anna operated as a team, always ready to help one another out. Even during tests, the sisters managed to discreetly pass notes with answers. It was something incredible, as if they could read each other's minds. The twins grew into kind-hearted, good-natured, and joyful young women. They easily connected with people and lit up any group. Amanda and Anna dreamed of becoming nurses to help the sick and ailing. And though their family lacked the funds for both daughters' education, their parents vowed to do whatever it took to make their girls' dreams come true. With tears in her eyes, Mrs. Rule, Ramirez recounted how she and her husband worked tirelessly to give Amanda and Anna the chance to attend college. It was their shared dream, and they were willing to make any sacrifice for their children's happiness. Amanda and Anna's classmates and friends always remarked on their kindness, sincerity, and willingness to lend a hand. The girls were the true jewels of school life, ever smiling, welcoming, and open to connection. They enthusiastically participated in all kinds of events, from charity fairs to school plays. It seemed nothing could cast a shadow over their happy childhood and carefree adolescence. Yet life brings not just joys and triumphs, but obstacles too that must be overcome. For Amanda and Anna, the trial came in the form of their father's illness. Mr. Ramirez fell gravely sick, leaving the family in dire straits. But even in those dark times, the sisters never lost hope, supporting each other every step. They banded together even tighter, striving to help their mother and ease their father's suffering. This period became a true test of their spiritual fortitude and sisterly bonds' resilience. But that carefree childhood passed quickly, and the sisters had to grow up. Anna was the first to marry her beloved Louis and give birth to 3 wonderful children. She became a doting mother who spared no effort for her little ones. At the same time, Anna completed nursing courses and began working as a licensed nurse. Patients and colleagues adored Anna for her kindness, warmth, and willingness to help at a moment's notice. As her co-workers recounted, Anna was a true angel in the hospital, always smiling, compassionate, and tireless. She had a knack for lifting every patient's spirits, finding the right words of solace and support. Anna worked hard to secure a bright future for her kids. Yet despite her busyness, she always made time for her large family, especially her beloved sister Amanda. Anna often visited her parents, sisters, and brothers. Chatting with Amanda nearly every day, the girls would talk for hours on the phone, sharing experiences and supporting each other. Even distance and life's troubles couldn't weaken their special bond. It seemed to only grow stronger over the years, helping the sisters overcome any hardship. Unlike her sister, Amanda was in no rush to marry. She too completed nursing courses and began working at the same hospital as Anna. The girls were together again like in childhood, now saving lives side by side. Colleagues joked that with nurses like the Ramirez sisters, any patient would recover in no time, as they were a true guardian angel team. Like Anna, Amanda was always ready to lend a hand, uplift with a kind word and sincere smile. Patients adored her warmth and compassion, while colleagues respected her professionalism and dedication. In her free time, Amanda often visited her sister to play with her nieces and nephews and catch up with Anna. The sisters could spend hours in the kitchen over cups of coffee, reminiscing about childhood and discussing their girlhood dreams. They laughed until they cried, recounting hilarious tales from the past, and cried sharing each other's pains and disappointments. These moments of sisterly closeness were the most precious for them, for it was in those instances that they truly felt happy and needed by one another. Amanda too dreamed of getting married and having children, so she actively helped Anna care for her babies, gaining first-hand experience in motherhood. The first years of Anna's eldest daughter's life unfolded under the watchful eyes of her loving mother and doting Aunt Amanda. This allowed the sisters to bond even tighter and preserve their special connection. And for Amanda, caring for her niece became an invaluable school for future parenthood. She joyfully played with, fed, bathed, and doted on the little one. Anna joked that with such a great helper, she could have 10 kids, and Anna herself was in dire need of her twins' assistance juggling 3 young children plus work. The young mother could barely keep up with all her duties. Amanda tried to be there, offering her shoulder in the toughest moments. She visited her sister every weekend, helped with cleaning, cooked delicious meals so Anna could get some rest. The sisters strolled through parks with the kids, went shopping, discussed their girly secrets. These were moments of true happiness and unity when it seemed the whole world revolved around their small yet mighty family. Eventually, Amanda got a boyfriend and unexpectedly became pregnant. It was a real surprise for both sisters, but they knew they'd tackle any challenge together. Now it was Anna's turn to fully support her sister, sharing wisdom and advice. The girls jointly prepared for the arrival of their parents' first grandchild and Amanda's firstborn. They spent hours picking out baby items, setting up the nursery, dreaming of what he would be like. Amanda's pregnancy was not an easy one, with severe morning sickness and swelling. But Anna was always by her side, ready to help and encourage her sister. She drove Amanda to all her medical checkups, monitored her well-being, ensured she ate properly and didn't overexert herself. Anna understood how crucial it was for Amanda to feel protected and needed during this difficult time. And then that long-awaited day finally arrived. Little Alex, Amanda's firstborn and Anna's nephew, entered the world.
The sisters couldn't get enough of the tiny bundle who resembled them both so much. Together they cared for, bathed, and lulled the baby to sleep. Alex became yet another proof of their inseparable bond, one more thread tying their fates tightly together. Motherhood transformed Amanda, making her more responsible and wise. Now she understood her sister's anxieties and joys even better. The girls could spend hours discussing childhood antics, exchanging parenting tips, dreaming of their kids' futures. They knew their children would grow up just as close and loving as they were. Over the years, the children grew while Amanda and Anna's sisterly bond only strengthened further. They continued to be each other's pillars, sharing every joy and sorrow. Their kids too grew up together like siblings, inheriting their mother's love and devotion to family. Despite the demands of motherhood, the sisters still found time to cut loose. Amanda and Anna loved partying and living it up with friends. They often hit the clubs together, dancing until dawn. Among their crew, the twins radiated wild energy, positivity, and some magical aura of unity. The Ramirez sisters seemed to read each other's minds, understanding every half-uttered word, laughing at inside jokes only they shared. On June 22, 2019, Amanda and Anna went out partying again. At that point, they were 27, with Anna raising 3 young kids, while Amanda had recently given birth to her first daughter and was battling postpartum depression. But despite the exhaustion and responsibilities, the sisters decided to let loose and dance like old times. The girls first had fun at a club with friends. Around midnight, the group headed to their cousin's place. There, the sisters continued drinking, laughing, and snapping carefree selfies. In one photo posted to social media around 5 a.m., the beaming twins posed with drinks in hand, the caption reading they were feeling those positive vibrations. Little did anyone know then that this picture would become the sisters' final living image. As the detective who investigated this case, I understand how precious every moment spent with loved ones truly is. That photo became a symbol of just how fragile human life can be and how crucial it is to savor every instant while we can. In that snapshot, Amanda and Anna look carefree and joyful, blissfully unaware of the tragedy looming just ahead. Around 5:30 a.m., tragedy struck. It was at that moment that Anna suffered a deep stab wound to her chest and collapsed bleeding onto the sidewalk outside her cousin's home. The police received a frantic 911 call around 5:40 a.m. from Amanda. The terrified woman pleaded for help, screaming that her sister was injured and bleeding profusely. Before medics and cops arrived, Anna was still breathing but soon lost consciousness from the trauma and blood loss. An ambulance rushed the victim to the nearest medical center. Doctors fought for nearly an hour to save Anna's life, but at 6:20 a.m. they pronounced her dead. The severe stab wound proved fatal. The mother of 3 had perished in the arms of medical staff. This tragic event came as a true shock to the Ramirez family and all who knew Anna. The horrific news of her death spread like wildfire through the small town, leaving a trail of unanswered questions in its wake. No one could believe that this joyful, loving woman had left this world so young under such mysterious circumstances. For Amanda, losing her sister was the hardest blow of all. In an instant, she lost her closest kin whom she'd walked through life side by side with. The pain of this loss was unbearable, the realization that Anna was gone for good seeming like a waking nightmare to escape from. But the harsh reality was that Anna had truly passed, forever changing the lives of her loved ones. Now the Ramirez family would have to find a way to keep living without her, raise her children, remember her with love and sorrow. And Amanda would have to grow accustomed to never being able to hug her sister, seek her advice, or simply sit in silent sisterly company again. Anna's death left a whirlwind of questions unanswered. What had happened that fateful night? Who could have wished harm upon this kind-hearted woman? Was it an accident or intentional crime? The answers still needed to be found, and that became the primary mission for the police and detectives investigating the case. But whatever the official findings, for Anna's loved ones, she would forever remain a loving daughter, sister, mother, and friend. Her bright spirit would live on in their hearts, her memory providing warmth in the darkest hours. The shocking news of Anna's death left the entire Ramirez family stunned. No one could believe that some madman had inflicted a fatal wound upon the young mother in the middle of the street. After all, Anna was a kind, compassionate girl with no enemies or ill wishes, no run-ins with the law. So who could have dealt with a nurse so brutally? A blind coincidence or someone from her inner circle? Amanda's behavior immediately raised many questions for the police. Her clothing was covered in stains of her dead sister's blood, while her hands bore fresh cuts characteristic of a struggle over a knife. Moreover, neighbors claimed to have heard a loud argument between the sisters, but no male voices.
These details compelled investigators to pay special attention to Amanda and her possible involvement in the tragedy. At first, Amanda refused to let the officers into her cousin's apartment, insisting she had just accidentally cut herself. But the bloody footprints on the floor and blood-stained kitchen knife in the sink made detectives suspect a complex case of family violence. The woman was taken in for questioning, where she would have to explain her behavior and recount everything that happened that fateful night. During interrogation, Amanda acted strangely and ambiguously. She oscillated between crying and pleading for belief in her innocence, then abruptly shutting down and refusing to answer questions. She claimed not to remember many details due to alcohol intoxication, that she and her sister had argued over something trivial, followed by a blackout. Such testimony only strengthened investigators' suspicions about Amanda's role in the murder. Other party guests confirmed the sisters had indeed quarreled before Anna stormed out alone. But no one could say precisely what happened next and how she sustained her fatal injury. Forensics showed the knife used to kill the woman belonged to the owners of the apartment where the party took place. However, no fingerprints were found, and the sister's cousin swore he wasn't involved in the crime. This tangled case became a true challenge for detectives. On one hand, all evidence pointed to Anna's killer being someone in her inner circle, possibly even her own sister. But on the other, the motive for such a brutal crime remained unclear. After all, the Ramirez sisters had always been renowned for their inseparability and genuine love for each other. Who and why would want to shatter that special bond? As the investigation dragged on, the Ramirez family tried to recover from the horrific tragedy. They couldn't fathom Amanda intentionally harming her own flesh and blood, offering her unconditional support. But lingering doubts and unanswered questions tormented them. Why was Amanda acting so strangely? What really transpired that night? And would they ever uncover the truth about Anna's death? These questions haunted Anna's loved ones and friends. They understood the answers could prove too painful and shocking. Yet they also knew without the truth they couldn't truly move forward, couldn't properly bid Anna farewell and find solace. Initially, Amanda tried convincing the police she had simply found her already injured sister on the sidewalk. She claimed to have approached Anna, attempted to stop the bleeding, and gotten covered in blood herself in the process. Then, scared, she ran to the apartment to await the ambulance. But this version poorly aligned with the defensive cuts on Amanda's hands that immediately raised investigators' suspicions she was hiding something. They began scrutinizing her testimony more thoroughly. The woman quickly realized she wasn't being believed and changed her story. Now she insisted that she and Anna had been drinking at their cousin's place when they abruptly got into an argument, even resulting in Anna slapping her. Afterwards, Anna left the home while Amanda stayed behind with their cousin. 45 minutes later, she went outside and discovered her sister's bloodied body. This account seemed more plausible, yet still left many questions unanswered. Investigators tried determining what exactly the sisters had quarreled over and whether it could have motivated a murder. But Amanda kept altering her statements, getting muddled in the details, unable to clearly explain what happened. At times she claimed not remembering the conflict's cause, then suddenly recalling minor insults that supposedly escalated into a physical fight. Such inconsistent, contradictory testimony only deepened detectives' suspicions about Amanda's involvement in the crime. They suspected she was concealing something, perhaps trying to cover for herself or someone else, but proving it was no easy feat with no direct evidence against Amanda, while her statements continually changed. Interviewing other witnesses didn't clarify matters either. The sister's cousin corroborated they had fought, but insisted hearing and seeing nothing suspicious. Neighbors reported loud shouts and scuffling noises, but none could pinpoint precisely who exited the building and when. Investigators found themselves at a dead end. All signs pointed to a crime of passion, yet the motive and circumstances remained baffling, and Amanda's convoluted statements only further muddied the waters. Meanwhile, the Ramirez family grieved their terrible tragedy. They couldn't fathom Anna being gone, desperately searching for answers. Parents and relatives tried supporting Amanda, believing her innocence, yet tortured by lingering doubts. Why was she acting so strangely? What really happened that night? And would they ever uncover the truth? For Amanda, the situation became a true ordeal. She had to live daily with the burden of guilt and suspicion, respond to uncomfortable questions from detectives and kin, reliving that horrific moment she claimed to have discovered her sister's body again and again. And though the woman maintained her non-involvement, her own memories and feelings grew increasingly tangled, tormenting her every waking moment. Would Amanda be able to prove her innocence? Could the investigation unravel this complex knot of contradictory testimonies and find the real killer? And what price would the Ramirez family have to pay for the truth about Anna's death? Amanda claimed not to remember the reasons for arguing with her sister. She had drunk too much that night. She then recounted how, after being slapped, something seemed to short-circuit in her head. She blacked out, only coming to while standing over bloodied Anna with a knife in hand. Terrified, she tossed the knife in the sink and called an ambulance. The woman wept bitterly, begging to be believed that she hadn't wanted her little sister dead. Her testimony rang sincere yet raised many questions and doubts for investigators. Detectives concluded Amanda was holding something back. It was doubtful a simple quarrel after 27 years of an ideal sisterly bond could escalate into such a bloody attack. Those mysterious lapses in memory also raised major skepticism. Police suspected Amanda had long harbored resentment towards her sister that came bursting out in a drunken rage with a knife. They began carefully examining the sister's past, searching for possible triggers for conflict. The fact that the woman had struck Anna with one precise blow to the heart indicated premeditated intent to kill, and her attempt to shift blame onto some abstract assailant only worsened the situation. The family denied any serious conflicts between the sisters. Their cousin corroborated the fight, but admitted not knowing what had provoked the argument between the twins. Without this key information, investigators knew unraveling the truth would prove difficult. The defensive cuts on Amanda's hands seemed to confirm her account of struggling over the knife. But if events unfolded as she claimed, why brandish a deadly weapon during a tiff with her sister in the first place? And why not immediately call an ambulance instead of returning to the apartment? These lingering questions tormented detectives striving to reconstruct the night's fateful events. Amanda couldn't answer those questions. She insisted remembering precious little from that evening, too intoxicated and ravaged by postpartum depression. But despite her tears and pleas for belief, police remained convinced something horrific had transpired between the sisters that morning Amanda wasn't divulging. Whatever it was had culminated in one sister's death with a knife in the other's grip, and now investigators had to determine whether it was tragic accident or premeditated murder. As the probe dragged on, the Ramirez family struggled to find solace and understand what had befallen their girls. They couldn't fathom Amanda intentionally harming the sister she'd been inseparable from her whole life. Yet gnawing doubts and speculations tormented them. Was Amanda concealing some terrible secret? Had that secret ignited the fatal fight? And would they ever know the truth? Meanwhile, Amanda herself, broken by grief and despair, strove to prove her innocence. She replayed that night's events in her mind over and over, but memories remained jumbled and fragmented. The woman couldn't comprehend how she could have caused her beloved sister's death, even accidentally, and the blackouts only compounded her confusion and fear. Could she truly be repressing something unaware herself? Police continued gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses, hoping to find the key to unraveling this chilling tale. They understood any detail could prove pivotal, any testimony could shed light on that fateful night. Yet the more they uncovered, the more tangled the case became, and the harder it was to believe Amanda could have intentionally taken her twin sister's life. This tragedy became an ordeal not just for the Ramirez family, but for all who knew Amanda and Anna. People struggled to comprehend how such a loving, close-knit clan could find themselves at the epicenter of such a horrific story, and the suspicions and rumors only salted the already raw wounds. The media pounced on the news, further complicating detectives' work. As a practicing detective myself, I understand the immense pressure public scrutiny exerts, making it even harder to focus on the job at hand. The investigation had reached a dead end when suddenly an anonymous call came through to the police hotline. The unknown caller claimed Anna had been murdered by her own sister out of jealousy. This version was later corroborated by the victim's aunt, who alleged Amanda had been secretly carrying on an affair with Anna's husband, exploiting her uncanny resemblance to her twin. When Anna uncovered this liaison, she apparently accused her sister of treacherous betrayal in a heated rage. This bombshell information became a true sensation, compelling detectives to view the case from a new angle. The aunt insisted she had overheard Amanda boasting to a friend about her adulterous tryst with Anna's husband, mockingly adding how her dimwit sister remained oblivious. This theory could explain Amanda's strange behavior, adamantly denying the fight's trigger. If the woman had indeed seduced her brother-in-law, she likely wouldn't want to admit to such a shameful act. Investigators began scrutinizing interpersonal dynamics within the Ramirez family more closely, seeking confirmation of this scandalous hypothesis. However, all other relatives, friends, and especially Anna's husband unanimously dismissed rumors of a love triangle. They maintained the twins loved each other above all else, while Anna adored her Louis and would never have betrayed him. Suspicions of infidelity struck the kin as absurd and outrageous, completely inconsistent with the deceased's bride image. They couldn't fathom Amanda so treacherously deceiving her lifelong inseparable sister. Amanda and Anna's 19-year-old younger sister Monica swore under oath that the twins simply couldn't have betrayed one another that way, bound by a profound spiritual connection. The girl testified that Anna had been dating Lewis for years, while Amanda had her own longtime boyfriend whom she had a daughter with and planned to marry. So there was no incentive for an affair with her brother-in-law, Monica insisted. Her testimony cast doubt on the love triangle theory, compelling a search for alternative motives. When police notified Amanda of her sister's death, she allegedly flew into hysterics. According to Monica, who was on the phone with Amanda in that moment, her sister wept so inconsolably and begged for belief that her tears clearly stemmed from genuine anguish rather than a treacherous deceiver's feigned remorse. The family continued maintaining the police investigation files amounted to unfounded speculation and slander. They couldn't accept Amanda being capable of such a horrific crime. Investigators found themselves in a difficult position. On one hand, the jealousy-fueled love triangle seemed plausible, potentially explaining Amanda's bizarre conduct. But on the other, testimony from the sisters' loved ones directly contradicted this narrative. Plus, no hard evidence of an affair could be uncovered. An anonymous call and the aunt's hearsay provided far too flimsy a basis for premeditated murder charges. In my opinion, this love triangle is pure nonsense, pardon my bluntness. But if you have your own theory, feel free to share it with me in the comments. I'd be happy to discuss it further. Meanwhile, Amanda's defense insisted on her innocence. Her attorneys argued all evidence against their client amounted to circumstantial contradictions. They urged the court not to fall for provocations and conjecture, but rely solely on facts and common sense. The defenders stressed that Amanda and Anna were not just sisters, but best friends who would never betray each other. The case garnered increasing publicity, drawing intense public and media scrutiny. Public opinion diverged. Some believed in Amanda's innocence and sympathized with the Ramirez family's plight, while others remained convinced of her guilt, demanding harsh punishment. This trial became a true ordeal for all participants, especially Amanda, fighting not just for her freedom, but to preserve her sister's honor and good name. In September 2019, Amanda entered into a plea deal with prosecutors. She admitted that under the influence of alcohol and postpartum depression, she had unconsciously, in a state of passion, stabbed her sister with a knife. The woman insisted she harbored no malicious intent and bitterly regretted her actions, having essentially ruined 2 lives, her own and her beloved sister's. Her confession came as a shock to all who had followed this high-profile case. During the trial, Amanda wept bitterly, begging God and everyone present for forgiveness, calling herself the vilest creature while pleading for a chance to return. She stated she would now carry the cross of remorse and the pain of irreparable loss until the end of her days. The court's sentence paled in comparison to the eternal pains of conscience she claimed. Her words moved those in the courtroom, yet could not bring the deceased Anna back. The judge ruled Anna's killing an intentional crime, but took into account Amanda's sincere remorse and extenuating circumstances. She was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment with possibility of parole after serving 5 years. Amanda broke down sobbing upon hearing the sentence, imploring the heavens and all around to forgive her most grievous sin. She understood this punishment amounted to only a fraction of the guilt she would bear for life. After the trial, the victims' relatives stated they harbored no ill will towards Amanda and accepted her remorse. Amanda and Anna's mother took custody of her grandchildren, while the rest of the family vowed to support the imprisoned woman's young daughter until her release. The Kim believed Amanda had sincerely repented and deserved a chance at atonement. They held faith that in time they could forgive her and restore family ties for the children's sake and Anna's memory. Such a chilling story, colleagues. As difficult as it is to admit, it was drinking and unbridled emotion that ruined the lives of 2 young women, 2 families, depriving 5 children of a mother's love. And the core mystery, what truly sparked that fatal burst of rage, continues to be debated by police, attorneys, journalists to this day. The official investigation failed to provide a definitive answer. Amanda's loved ones view her an innocent victim of tragic circumstance, while law enforcement leans towards a theory of premeditated murder driven by jealousy. Proving or disproving a clandestine liaison between Amanda and her brother-in-law is now impossible. The woman adamantly denies any such subtext to the fight, while Anna's husband categorically rejects even hypothetical possibility of such events transpiring. This secret, it seems, will be forever buried alongside Ada. Yet despite all the speculation and uncomfortable questions, one sad fact alone remains certain: a young mother of 2 infants ended her 27-year-old twin sister's life with a single knife blow and now bitterly regrets her actions.
and the bereaved Ramirez family will take a long time recovering from the consequences of that dreadful night of June 22, 2019. They will have to learn to live with this pain and Anna's memory, raise her children, and build a new life without her. This tragedy serves as a grave lesson for us all. A lesson in how fragile and vulnerable human life truly is, how easily it can be shattered in one fateful instant, and that neither family bonds nor love can shield us from horrific mistakes and irreversible loss. Amanda must now carry the burden of guilt and remorse for her crime for the rest of her days. While we outside observers can only sympathize with her shattered fate and pray such tragedies never repeat themselves, the story of Amanda and Anna Ramirez is more than just a criminal chronicle. It's a true human drama. A drama about two ruined lives, about love twisted into hatred, and about the remorse that may perhaps lead to atonement. And although justice has been served and the guilty punished, this story will continue aching in the hearts of all who know it for a long time to come. For there is no greater pain than losing a loved one, especially when that loss results from a fatal mistake by someone close.
It all began on February 10, 2004, when an event shook the small suburb of Altamont Springs in the state of Florida. A young girl and her boyfriend committed a horrific crime that shocked the local community with its brutality and cynicism. It involved the girl's father, a baseball bat, and a garbage container. Even after years of investigation, many details of this chilling act remain a mystery. Courtney Schulhoff, a young resident of Altamont Springs, found herself at the center of this gruesome story. A combination of youthful maximalism, immaturity, and a desire for revenge pushed her to commit a terrible crime, the murder of her own father. This case vividly demonstrates the tragic consequences that uncontrolled emotions and a lack of common sense can lead to. Altamont Springs, a cozy town with a population of about 40,000, is located in the heart of Florida, in Seminole County. Usually, it's a peaceful and safe place, ideal for family life and recreation. Its proximity to many tourist attractions makes Altamont Springs an attractive place to live. However, behind the external gloss and hospitality lies a dark side, as evidenced by the shocking case of Courtney Schulhoff. The quiet community of Altamont Springs became the arena for a chilling family drama that led to cold-blooded murder. This story reminds us that evil can hide behind a mask of ordinariness, and that even seemingly prosperous families can harbor terrible secrets. Courtney Christine Schulhoff was born in sunny Florida on December 27, 1987. Her parents were Stephen and Tracy Schulhoff, but unfortunately, their marriage did not stand the test of time. The divorce of her parents was a heavy blow for young Courtney, leaving a deep mark on her soul. After her mother left the family nest, the girl remained under the care of her father in the house where she spent her childhood. However, the lives of Stephen and Courtney underwent further changes when financial difficulties forced them to move to a new home. Initially, this news did not enthuse Courtney, but over time, she came to terms with the new circumstances. It seemed that life was gradually getting back on track, and the first few months in the new place were relatively calm. In 2003, Courtney was a student at Lyman High School. Once a diligent and successful student, after her parents' divorce, she began to rapidly lose interest in education. Skipping classes and indifference to grades turned the once promising student into an outsider. But changes were happening not only within the walls of the school. Outside the educational institution, Courtney fell under the influence of a dubious company. New friends with mixed reputations became her guides into a world far from the one she was used to. These acquaintances had a detrimental effect on the girl's personality, gradually changing her values and priorities. I have seen many similar stories. Parental divorce often becomes a trigger for problematic behavior in teenagers. A lack of attention, emotional instability, and a desire to be accepted in a new environment can push young people down the wrong path. However, even in the darkest times, there is always hope for change if the warning signs are recognized in time and a helping hand is extended. I could hardly believe my ears when I heard what happened next. Courtney's transformation was not limited to just her outward appearance. Her behavior became brazen and rebellious, challenging everyone around her. Naturally, the main blow was taken by her father, who embodied the main authority in the girl's life. Fierce conflicts erupted between them, fueling the fire of hostility and misunderstanding. The tension reached its peak when Courtney decided to temporarily move in with her mother, Tracy, seeking refuge from her father's control. However, this step proved to be short-lived. Tracy quickly realized that she was not ready to accept the new version of her daughter with all her problems and challenges. So, having no other choice, Stephen was forced to open the doors of his home to his prodigal daughter once again. Courtney's return home brought no relief. On the contrary, old problems flared up with renewed vigor, especially the issue of school attendance. The girl skipped classes more and more often, seeking solace in the company of her dubious friends. One of their favorite meeting places was the running track located near Lyman High School. It was here that fate brought Courtney together with Michael, a 20-year-old college student. A spark ignited between them, quickly growing into a passionate romance. It seemed that in Michael's arms, the girl found what she had been missing: so much understanding, support, and a sense of her own significance. However, would this meeting become a lifeline for Courtney, or, on the contrary, further entangle her in the web of problems? I have seen more than once how young people, finding themselves at a crossroads, seek salvation in romantic relationships. However, this is often just an illusion that hides the true roots of the problem. Without proper attention and help from loved ones, such connections can become a catalyst for even greater upheavals and dramas. Michael Morin, Courtney's new chosen one, seemed to be the complete opposite of the girl. A former high school football player, he demonstrated remarkable success in his studies, regularly receiving the highest grades. After entering a nearby college, Michael continued to follow the right path, meeting the expectations of his parents. However, meeting Courtney became a turning point in his life. Several weeks of intense communication turned their relationship into something more than just a teenage infatuation. Michael and Courtney became inseparable, spending every free moment together. Their obsession with each other overshadowed everything else, and soon Courtney practically stopped attending school, finally putting an end to her education. The news that his daughter had unofficially dropped out of school came as a real shock to Stephen Schulhoff. As a father who constantly fought with Courtney over her poor academic performance, he immediately saw the root of the problem in Michael. From the very beginning, a strong tension arose between them, which only exacerbated Courtney's already difficult relationship with her father. The girl perceived her father's dissatisfaction as an unwillingness to see her happy. Time and again, she tried to convince Stephen that Michael was a good person worthy of his trust. But the man remained adamant, as rumors had reached him about the young man's dark past associated with car theft. Stephen sincerely sought to warn his daughter against rash steps, but his words only met with a deaf wall of misunderstanding and stubbornness. I have witnessed similar situations more than once. Youthful infatuation often clouds the mind, causing young people to ignore the voice of reason and the advice of their elders. However, it is at such moments that it is extremely important to find the right approach so as not to push the child away, but to help them see reality. Unfortunately, in the case of Courtney and Stephen, it seems it was already too late for compromises. I was stunned when I learned about the unexpected twist in this story. The conflict between Courtney and her father Stephen reached a boiling point. The girl began to openly accuse him of abuse, and unfortunately, there were some grounds for this. One time, the situation spiraled out of control when Courtney invited friends over, including Michael. Stephen, returning home earlier than expected, caught them smoking and drinking alcohol. The enraged father burst into the room where the improvised party was taking place. Not holding back his emotions, he began to reproach his daughter for arranging a get-together without his permission. Screams and accusations filled the space, and eventually, in front of Courtney's friends, Stephen slapped her across the face. This moment became a turning point, as now the girl had real evidence of physical abuse by her father. Despite the seriousness of the situation, neither Courtney nor Stephen took any steps to resolve it. Instead, their relationship continued to plummet into an abyss of mutual resentment and disrespect. Although the girl had dropped out of school, she refused to look for a job. Instead, she used her father's credit card without permission, buying expensive clothes and things online. Courtney would bring home boxes of new purchases, disregarding Stephen's worsening financial situation. I have seen many similar situations where family conflicts reach a critical point. A lack of mutual understanding, an unwillingness to compromise, and the selfish actions of each party only intensify the tension. In the case of Courtney and Stephen, it seemed that they found themselves in an enchanted circle of mutual claims and grievances from which there was no way out. However, even in the most difficult situations, there is always a chance for reconciliation if both parties are willing to take a step towards each other. Perhaps if Stephen and Courtney had found the strength to sit down at the negotiating table, listen to each other, and try to find common ground, they could have avoided the tragic consequences. But unfortunately, they chose a different path, the path of confrontation and escalation of the conflict. The next fragment of this story made me hold my breath. Despite the escalation of the conflict, Courtney continued to act against her father's will. For several months, she secretly invited Michael to their home for overnight stays while Stephen was asleep. Even after her father categorically forbade her from seeing the young man, the girl found ways to circumvent this restriction. Instead of sneaking out to meet him, she openly brought Michael home whenever she pleased. Every conversation between Courtney and Stephen turned into a battlefield. The father did not spare harsh words towards his daughter and her chosen one, which only deepened the gulf between them. Over time, the situation became increasingly unmanageable, and it seemed that reconciliation was no longer possible. But one day, Stephen took an unexpected step. Upon opening his checkbook, he noticed that several pages were missing. Without hesitation, the man called the police and filed a report against his own daughter, hoping it would be a harsh lesson for her. After talking to the investigator, Courtney returned home, feeling a new level of fear towards her father. From now on, she perceived him not just as a strict and cruel authority figure, but as a real threat to her well-being. Personally, I have witnessed similar family dramas more than once. Conflicts between parents and children, especially during the teenage years, can be extremely exhausting and destructive. However, involving law enforcement in resolving family problems is always a last resort. Often, it only worsens the situation, undermining trust and creating an atmosphere of fear and mistrust. In the case of Courtney and Stephen, it seems all chances for a peaceful resolution of the conflict were lost. Instead of trying to find common ground, they chose the path of escalating the confrontation. By filing a report against his daughter, the father crossed a line after which a return to normal relations became practically impossible. The fear and resentment that gripped Courtney only fueled her desire to break free from Stephen's control at any cost. What happened next seemed unbelievable, but it was the truth. Courtney, consumed by fear and despair, was ready to do anything to get rid of the threat her father posed. But life made its own adjustments, further complicating the already tense situation. At the end of 2003, Stephen began dating a woman named Elaine. The details of their acquaintance remained a secret, but the very fact of her father's new relationship added fuel to the conflict. During the same period, Courtney, trying to somehow put her life in order, signed up for courses to obtain a high school diploma. At the same time, she continued to meet with Michael, despite Stephen's constant attempts to hinder their relationship. Eventually, the lovers, tired of the endless pressure, decided to run away together. The only obstacle on the path to their cherished freedom was the lack of transportation and money. Courtney and Michael's plan was simple: take the young man's father's car and head to Maryland, where they hoped to find shelter and financial support from the girl's grandparents. But as often happens, even the most well-thought-out plans can fail. Having stolen the car, the lovers set off on their journey, full of hope for a better future. However, halfway to Maryland, they suddenly changed their minds and turned the car back towards home. What exactly prompted them to take this step remains a mystery, but the consequences of this act, especially for Michael, proved to be extremely unfavorable. I have seen it when young people, consumed by despair and a desire to break free from parental control, resorted to rash actions. Running away from home, stealing a car, all this seems like a solution to problems in the short term. But reality quickly puts everything in its place, and the consequences of such actions can be devastating for all parties involved. In the case of Courtney and Michael, their attempt to escape only worsened the already tense situation. Instead of finding freedom and understanding, they found themselves facing new challenges and threats. And although the reasons for their sudden decision to return home remain unknown, it can be assumed that fear of uncertainty and awareness of the real consequences of their actions played a significant role in this choice. What I learned next turned this case into a real labyrinth of secrets and mysteries. Michael's parents, just like Stephen, decided to turn to the law to punish their son for stealing the car. The young man found himself behind bars, where he spent a long 70 days pondering his actions and future. After his release, Michael was given a probationary period, but this was only the beginning of his problems. The young man's parents, convinced that Courtney had a detrimental effect on their son, began to insist on ending the relationship. From the outside, it was obvious that Michael and Courtney's relationship was far from healthy and constructive. However, neither the lovers nor their parents realized how much worse things could get. This was especially true for Stephen, Courtney's father, who did not even suspect that his life would be tragically cut short a few months later. After Michael's return from imprisonment, the situation escalated to a critical point. The young man's parents, especially his father, continued to pressure their son, demanding that he break off his relationship with Courtney. But Michael was adamant in his decision to stay with his beloved, This led to his angry parents kicking the young man out of the house, leaving him homeless. Finding himself on the street, Michael found shelter in the most unexpected place, the apartment of his girlfriend's father. Under the cover of night, he would sneak into Stephen's dwelling to spend the night there. It wasn't the first time the young man had secretly stayed in the apartment, but now it had become a daily routine. From a detective's point of view, this situation was explosive. The tension between Michael, Courtney, and Stephen had reached its peak, and any little thing could become the spark that would ignite this powder keg. Michael's nightly visits, his presence in the house despite Stephen's categorical prohibition, created an atmosphere of constant fear and mistrust. All the participants in this drama seemed to be blinded by their emotions and desires, not noticing the obvious risks and dangers. The lovers sought to be together at any cost, not realizing that their actions only worsened the situation. The parents, in turn, tried to control the lives of their children, not realizing that excessive pressure only pushed them into each other's arms. What happened next exceeded all my wildest assumptions. The situation with Michael and Courtney was rapidly spiraling out of control. The young man, having left his college education, actually settled in Stephen's house without his knowledge or consent. Moreover, Michael even changed his official address to Courtney's father's residence and listed his home phone number as a contact person in his parole plans. All of this was happening behind Stephen's back, who had no idea of the extent of Michael's intrusion into his life. Despite the fact that the young man had effectively become homeless, he made no effort to find a job and provide for himself. Instead, all the expenses fell on Courtney's shoulders, who shamelessly used her father's credit card. When the card's limit was exhausted, Stephen planned to have a serious conversation with his daughter about her irresponsible behavior. But fate had other plans, and what happened next forever changed the lives of all the participants in this drama. On February 10, 2014, Elaine, Stephen's new companion, tried to call him several times, but to no avail. Worried by the long silence, the woman decided to personally visit her beloved's home. Sometime between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, Elaine got behind the wheel of her car and headed to Stephen's residence. What she saw as she approached the house instantly aroused her suspicion. On the sidewalk, she noticed Michael, Courtney's boyfriend, walking Stephen's dog. He was wearing one of the homeowner's t-shirts, which in itself was strange. But what alarmed Elaine the most was Michael's reaction when their eyes met. The young man, seeing her in the car, instantly rushed to call someone, as if he had been caught at the scene of a crime. This behavior only intensified the feeling that something was very wrong. As an experienced detective, I know that intuition rarely fails in such situations. Although Elaine had no direct evidence, she felt that Michael's strange behavior concealed something sinister. His presence in Stephen's house, his free use of the owner's belongings, and his instant panicked reaction to Elaine's appearance were all alarming signals that could not. Elaine, wasting no time, got out of the car and headed for the front door of Stephen's house. At the threshold, she met Courtney, but the door was locked. When asked about her father's whereabouts, the girl shrugged, replying that she had no idea. Then she walked away, leaving Elaine standing in front of the closed door without a key. The woman noticed that Stephen's truck was still parked in its usual spot and decided to call the police. Local law enforcement officers arrived at Elaine's call and, having obtained a search warrant, entered the house through the back door. What they found inside stunned even the seasoned cops. In Stephen's bedroom, the walls were splattered with blood, and a bloodied baseball bat lay near the bed. But the most horrifying sight awaited them in a plastic garbage can the owner's mutilated body with a torn-off ear and a shattered face. Whoever committed this crime wasn't too concerned about hiding the traces. In addition, the police found bank statements on the dining table, some of which were marked with a pen. Courtney was nowhere to be seen. Elaine, who knew about the tense relationship between Stephen, his daughter, and her boyfriend, immediately suspected foul play. Law enforcement quickly organized a search for the suspects, but as it turned out, neither Courtney nor Michael tried too hard to escape or hide. The young man was found in the restroom of a nearby shopping mall, wearing Stephen's t-shirt, just as Elaine had said. He had the victim's wallet, car keys, and credit cards on him. Michael was detained for questioning. As for Courtney, it was even simpler. The girl turned herself in to the police at her mother's house. During interrogations, Courtney and Michael gave completely different testimonies. The young man initially claimed that he was living in the basement of Stephen's house, knew nothing about his death, and received the items from Courtney. He explained his escape to the mall by fear that the homeowner would find out about his presence. But when the police informed Michael about the murder, he suddenly changed his testimony. With tears in his eyes, the young man stated that everything happened as if in a fog, and he came to his senses already with a bloody bat in his hands. Michael confessed to the crime, but insisted that he acted at Courtney's instigation, who asked him to kill her father because of a conflict over money spent from a credit card. His story sounded confusing and unconvincing. Courtney, during the first interrogation, blamed everything on Michael, assuring that she only learned about her father's death from the young man. But later, in a separate confession, she told the detectives more details. According to her, the idea of murder belonged to Michael, and she only helped to take Stephen's dog out of the room and prepared the bat. While the young man was dealing with her sleeping and defenseless father, Courtney heard every sound. But the most unexpected twist occurred in September 2006, when at the final stage of the trial, Courtney was found guilty. Asked if she wanted to say something, the girl, who had been denying her involvement all this time, suddenly stated, "I would like to openly admit that Michael Morin is not the murderer of my father. I take full responsibility and accept the sentence handed down to me." This shocking statement was heard in the courtroom where Courtney Schulhoff was sentenced to life imprisonment without the right to parole. She listened to the verdict without visible emotion. Less than a year later, in April 2007, the trial of Michael Morin took place. He faced the death penalty if found guilty. And again, Courtney repeated that only she committed the crime and Michael knew nothing about it. However, her words contradicted the testimony of the young man himself, who even added new details allegedly. He and Courtney stopped by McDonald's and thought about throwing Stephen's body off a bridge. In the end, Michael Morin was also found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. According to information from 2017, Courtney Schulhoff's sentence was reduced to approximately 40 years. This case remains one of the most enigmatic in my practice. Despite the fact that both criminals received their deserved punishment, it is still unclear what really happened on that fateful night. Undoubtedly, Stephen was killed with a baseball bat, but who dealt the fatal blow remains an open question. On the one hand, Courtney confessed to killing her father. On the other hand, Michael also admitted his guilt, and it was in his basement that Stephen's bloody t-shirt, which the young man often wore, was found. Moreover, Michael was much larger and stronger than Courtney, so he had enough strength to deal with the victim using a bat. However, we should not forget that Stephen was sleeping and could not resist, and Courtney was able to describe the course of the crime in detail and even characterize her father's dying sounds. So who actually committed this brutal murder?